listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington. Kevin, we're back, but guess who's not? Tony's gone. Okay. Tony's gone. Kevin, how are you, buddy?
Well, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Now, the grand scheme of things, that was always expected.
Yeah.
You know, we had been teasing that for about 3 weeks, but...
That is true, and
maybe not in the way that everybody thought he was going to be gone.
Not in the way that everybody thought he was going to be gone. Not in a way that is supremely satisfying. We'll get into the cap implications and blah 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 all that later. But Tony DeAngelo was bought out. In case you missed the news, and we're going to talk about that right here in just 1 second. Before we get into that, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're doing good work growing over there, and we appreciate your help. Hit the like button too. Thank you. Okay, Tony DeAngelo, no longer a Philadelphia Flyer. He becomes the first player ever, according to Cap Friendly, to be wholly bought out by 2 separate teams. 25 years old. Already been bought out twice. Gonna get another job. Is a quality hockey player.
I thought he was older than that. He's 27.
I'm sorry, he's 27. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's older than that.
But still, he's going to get a job. He has a long playing career left, assuming he remains healthy and out of trouble.
Well, and let's be real. What does this open the door for now that he's been bought out? If everything was, it was trade to Carolina, trade back to Carolina, trade back to Carolina, what does it open the door for? It opens the door for, instead of Carolina taking on $2.5 million in salary for the trade, they can sign a 1-year, $1 million contract.
They're going to sign another 1-year rehab contract with Tony DeAngelo.
They might, and they might. I mean, they might. I don't want to assume anything because there's been a lot of rumors going on with Carolina and defensemen specifically.
Well, sure, we'll get into all that later.
Well, I'm going to touch on it. We're going to touch on it during this portion because it's relevant to what happened.
Absolutely, there's a monstrous trade around the league that does have implications. Involving the Tony DeAngelo trade.
If it goes through, which is, again, like you're doing this big if thing, and I guess that's really where we need to start is what happened to the trade, because we've done 2 different shows now, I think, because we did the show leading into the draft with this, because there was all the stuff with the that was when the Kevin Hayes trade was on the table and all of that, so we did that show, and then we did the follow-up show, which was here's free agency and the draft picks and all that stuff. And it was still the same story, right?
Yep.
It was still.
We hadn't heard anything, honestly. Pretty much. It was pretty mum.
No, the only thing we had heard was that after everything with the first wave of free agency on the first day of free agency goes through, Danny Briere was kind of mum on whatever was going on, but Don Waddell said, "We have a trade in principle."
Yeah.
So we knew all of that. That's what I'm saying. Like. That's why it was so assumed. I mean, I even had some things that I was doing the last weekend when the trade was supposed to be able to be finalized.
You had the article written, didn't you?
I had it in draft so I could publish from my phone. Like that's how prepared everything was.
And we all were.
And the thing was that, okay, fine. If you want to go off of technicalities for a moment, I had it ready for Saturday, which was the 8th, literally the 1-year anniversary of the initial trade.
They probably would have waited until Sunday.
Right. If you wanted to go technicality, all right, whatever. I was at something both days. All right, so it's not going to be Saturday. Keep an eye out for Sunday.
You were locked and loaded with the article.
But I also wasn't honestly, I wasn't waiting for somebody to come through with some report about it. I was literally just waiting for a team announcement because that's where it was at this point.
Sure. Because we all knew it was happening. There wasn't going to be any new leakage. It was just going to be, hey, here's the press release that this thing happened.
Pretty much. And it didn't go down on Sunday either. And that probably sent some signals up in terms of
definitely a red flag.
Well, it started. That's where it started. What's going on? The waiting period of this deal that we were supposed to be waiting through came and went. So here's Sunday, July 9th. This is when we figured an announcement was coming. It didn't. And then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday also all come and go with nothing. I mean, as a matter of fact, we're going to get into something in a little bit that was other pieces of news that were happening during the course of the week before any resolution with the DeAngelo stuff.
Right.
I mean, there was other things happening that precursored the actual decision that the Flyers ultimately made. But there was other news, and you're kind of sitting there going, okay, like this is all valid at this time of year. Don't get me wrong, but where's
this isn't
the
the lingering story we're looking
where's the
for.
announcement that kind of puts a bow on this whole thing so we don't have to sit here and talk about it anymore, right? And it just never really came. And then, in the days since the trade could actually go through, the Hurricanes have been keeping a close eye on Erik Karlsson and the possibility that they could acquire him.
And I was just going to say, I think what happened was the trade got shut down immediately. They said, okay, we're going to take a 2-week cooler and think about it and blah, 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 no problem. And in the meantime, some bigger fish became available, and somebody got in Don Waddell's ear and said, hey, Erik Karlsson's a pretty good player. If we're trading for Tony DeAngelo, why don't we just trade for Erik Karlsson? Because he's kind of like a super-powered version of Tony DeAngelo. And
just came off of a Norris winning season, though.
Right. Hello. So. And is the reigning Norris winner. Hello. And it's one of those things that why would you trade for low rent the guy you're going for? We've seen in the playoffs over and over and over again that superstars change games, superstars make differences. And what was the downfall of the Carolina Hurricanes this year? They couldn't produce enough offense at the end of the day. And What does Erik Karlsson help you do? Tony DeAngelo doesn't play defense. Neither does Erik Karlsson. If you're going to get a one-way offensive player, Erik Karlsson is a much better on-ice product.
But you're going to take the guy who doubled DeAngelo's point total, basically. I mean, Karlsson had over 100 points this year for a team that finished third from the bottom. Or fourth from the bottom. Sorry, it was fourth from the bottom.
Right, and that deal's obviously not done yet. We're not sitting here talking about Erik Karlsson as a Carolina Hurricane because...
No, but as long as you feel like you have a shot, you're putting everything on hold is exactly the point. As long as you have a shot. And it wasn't just about Karlsson at this point. It was about if Erik Karlsson's on the table as a possible acquisition to make that fully work, because Karlsson's contract is massive.
Enormous.
We're not talking about a difference of, hey, guess what? Just because you don't take on the DeAngelo contract means you can fit.
No. We're talking about the Sharks retaining 40% and the cap hit still being $7 million.
And we're talking about in order for Carolina to still feel comfortable, rumors that they might move Brett Pesce.
Yeah, and
work. So you're talking about now.
That makes me nervous, but
now you're talking about two other trades that there is possibly on the table before you even get to the DeAngelo stuff, even though it's finalized. And I know there's a bunch of schools of thought with this because there's a bunch of reactions. There's reactions to the fact that, well, if the league wouldn't have shut down the trade over a technicality, especially when they didn't sign him to the initial contract and the GM who did sign the contract is no longer employed,
I don't want to call it a legitimate gripe because it was against the rules, and we do understand that. But that cost you the deal. Like if that deal goes through 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whatever it is, the whole situation is a little calmer.
No, but here's but this is why the question kind of comes out of this: is this actually better for the Flyers? In the long run, is this actually better? And
absolutely.
It turns out there's enough reasons to say yes versus no. I mean, look, I get it. For the second time this offseason, a trade that was expected to go through didn't go through in the way that was anticipated. In this case, not at all. The last time it was way less than what was anticipated, and we're going to get into that later as well because we're at the point where we can kind of talk about Danny Briere's offseason as a whole pretty close. There's not much left.
For the record, by the way, just because those trades didn't happen like they said he would, that doesn't mean Anthony Sanfilippo had bad information. Things change all the time. Okay.
It doesn't mean anything. To be
honest.
I
know that's what I'm saying. But
it doesn't mean anything.
The fact that we didn't get Torrey Krug in a first round pick doesn't mean that Anthony Sanfilippo had bad information on the day.
Was he the only one reporting that too? By the way,
he was
there was a lot of people in St. Louis who had all that lined up too. And
first, Anthony Sanfilippo is just how it got to Philly. He didn't come up with it. Anyway.
Well, he got maybe some of the same sources. Who knows? But whatever.
Maybe. But
either way, so is this actually the better option kind of thing? So let's kind of go backwards for a second, and we're going to touch in more detail on this piece of information in a couple minutes. But really, I think this whole process started when the Flyers re-signed Noah Cates.
Okay.
Now, we're going to get into Noah Cates later. because we're focused on DeAngelo right now. But when this contract happened, I believe that the reasoning behind this is because Cates was not only a restricted free agent, but had filed for arbitration. And therefore, now the Flyers had no more arbitration cases pending when this contract goes through. It opened up the second buyout window for them.
Yes.
Which
you get a 48-hour window.
Right, which means you only have so much time until this closes.
Right. This was your last chance at the apple in terms of buying Tony DeAngelo out. It was time to go or get off the pot. Like it's time to make a decision.
Well, and I think the other part of it is you have to think about this kind of from the perspective with DeAngelo and where he was with the Flyers. Because if the deal doesn't get done with Carolina during this buyout window and you continue to wait for Carolina, I think if the deal never got done, they were going to be stuck with him.
Absolutely.
And Danny Briere was just simply getting ahead of it.
Well, right. And the problem with this current situation is this isn't a situation where you can say, hey, man, we tried to trade you. It didn't work out. Come show up to work, play your best, pump your value. We'll get you out at the trade deadline. This guy was a cancer in the locker room. Like we're talking, he's not, I'm not going to say he's not welcome around the team, but it's not quite as easy as just saying, hey, come play for a little while, crank the trade value up, and we'll get you out of here.
And I don't even want to go that far with it because, to be honest, I don't know anything that happened that resulted in a problem in the room over the course of this 1 year. But I will tell you where I do think that everything went south, and in a hurry, because I've seen a lot of stuff about, he was a 50-point player and all stuff like that. And listen, I understand that. There's two big caveats with that. Number one is, this team was not very good this year, and
you can say the same thing about Erik Karlsson on the Sharks.
Hold on, and scored. So he scored a lot of either scored goals or had assists that came in garbage time. If you're paying close attention, and we could look at Erik Karlsson and find the same thing potentially, but Erik Karlsson also doubled the point total. Right?
Well, right, and that's the difference.
It probably means a lot less garbage time points, maybe a lot more, to be honest. Or if it's the same, then it's worse, right? Like if it's the same amount of garbage. But I'm not trying to go over that because here's where I really think things went south. And it's not in the point total, and it's not in DeAngelo didn't have a second, and I'm generalizing the term second half here, but a second half like Kevin Hayes did, where you went from 45 points in 50 games, nearly point per game, to 9 in 31. And it was clearly evident that the investment level wasn't as high, right? I don't think that was ever necessarily the case with DeAngelo. I don't think that he was never going to go out there and play the way that he played. But let's be real about something. Number one, what was he brought in to do initially?
Create offense.
Create offense and supposedly be a good, he's a power play specialist. And you had the worst power play in the league this year, and it wasn't even close. And that was a step backwards. You weren't the worst ranked power play a year ago, and now you are. So he didn't exactly help that. And then I really trace a lot of things the way and this is me just kind of thinking out loud about it, but I was thinking about it. And my thought was, I think things changed on March 7th. And the reason why I'm picking that date is because you are a handful of days after the trade deadline. Everybody on the planet at this given point in time, or everybody in the Philly area at least, is absolutely eviscerating Chuck Fletcher for the way that the deadline went. And Chuck Fletcher's going to get fired in 3 days, by the way.
Yep.
From March 7th. But something else happened on March 7th because the Flyers had a game that night, and they played, and they were playing a team that was clearly way better than they were. I'll say that because if I tell you what team it is off the bat, you're going to know. So
okay.
But they were playing a team that was clearly better than them, but they were having your typical late season John Tortorella coached team game, which is they're not out of the game results wise in the later stages of the third period. They're not out of the game. They're probably not going to win it, but they're not out of it, and they're pushing. They're really trying hard.
Yeah.
Giving the effort that Tortorella wanted to see. And
that really just sums up the season, doesn't it? Really trying hard.
Right, but you get the point. Now, if I tell you what team they're playing, maybe this will strike, the memory of where I'm going with this. They were playing the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Okay. Yeah, I had a feeling you were talking about this game. I know the game you're talking about.
Okay. So, very late in the game, trying to make a push, by the way. DeAngelo speared Corey Perry in the, you know what region.
In the groin.
In the groin, I guess. Yeah, that's the radio friendly way to say it, I suppose.
That's the term we use. Yep.
Yes, that's right. And that set off 5 members of the Tampa Bay Lightning to go absolutely berserk as they should for something like that. Because
he got him in the athletic supporter. How about that?
Sure. And so naturally, that's crossing the line on DeAngelo's part.
Of course. And we all called it at the moment. It's a 1-goal game, Tony. What are you doing?
I'm trying to remember if it was even a 1-goal game. I think it was 2 because they lost 5-2. But either way, you're pushing. There's still like 3 minutes left, maybe 3.5 minutes left in the game. He's going to get a major penalty out of this, which, they eventually scored on with like a minute left or something. I don't know, but whatever. I'm not. The details of that part aren't important.
Sure.
It was because the bottom line was, I think that after that game, that was one of the first times, because all year long, John Tortorella was kind of on DeAngelo's side, to be honest. I don't think there was really any bad blood even there. I mean, it's not that they didn't necessarily see eye to eye all year, but there was an understanding of, in Tortorella's eyes, what DeAngelo can bring if he knows how to toe the line.
Right. And it was 4-2, by the way, but the Flyers had been pushing and putting some good pressure on.
And regardless, it's like,
yes.
But you get the point. It was...
Well, right.
Tortorella was very defensive of what DeAngelo could still bring in terms of an edgy player. I mean, let's put it this way: DeAngelo and Travis Konechny, to an extent, are not that different in terms of the way that they're willing to be vocal.
He's defensive Travis Konechny in a lot of ways,
and in the way that they're willing to be that player that knows how to try to get under people's skin.
Sure,
That's obvious.
And if you make the playoffs, those kinds of players can be extremely valuable.
Now, I've never felt like I've seen Konechny be at a level where he doesn't know when to stop. Like I was watching throughout the course of the year, and DeAngelo would have moments where you're like, somebody better stop him, or he's going to do something that's stupid.
Well, right, and he has a history of doing that. A la spearing Corey Perry. And no, I agree that Travis Konechny has. There were a couple times in his first or second season where he got a little hot-headed, but no, he really knows it now. Yeah. He has found the line and knows how to get right up to it.
Well, and let's be real about something. There's also crossing the line from where it's just chirping somebody and trying to stir it up to
absolutely
the physicality of it, right? Like DeAngelo starts to get into it physically and then doesn't seem like he knows when to stop. And you've got a linesman who's using every ounce of his energy to hold him back. That's when you're sitting here saying, stop.
So the difference is he turns into a little bit of a runaway steam train and goes off the rails. Travis Konechny knows how to keep it attached, keep it all together, stay under control.
Well, and Konechny's not throwing it, like trying to throw hands or anything like that from over top of the linesman. He's still going to chirp you to death.
Oh, yeah, and he'll get scrappy with you if you're in his face and you guys are pushing back and forth.
If anything else, what Konechny does is he strategically is trying to get you to do it.
Absolutely. He is a big make you throw the first shot guy.
He's trying to anyway. And I'm not saying that sometimes DeAngelo's not, but once he lets loose, you can see it. I mean, you can just flat out see it. He had a couple of instances where he didn't cross the line, but he came close.
If you're going to engage in that game, you have to be able to laugh it off. You have to be impervious to it yourself. And Travis Konechny is, and you see around the league that the best guys are. Nothing bothers Brad Marchand. Nothing bothers Tom Wilson, although he can knock your head off. Like, nothing bothers these guys who that's their reputation. When it bothers you, when you fire back, that's when you get yourself in trouble. That's when Evgeny Malkin,
and stuff like this. Some of this stuff is irrelevant. It's irrelevant to what ends up happening here and all stuff like that. The bottom line is after that game, because let's put it this way: after that game, DeAngelo says he didn't think he did anything because he
never does.
Well, but that's also a natural reaction for anybody. Like if you don't feel like in your mind you did anything wrong, you're going to defend yourself. I get it.
And in his mind, he has never done anything wrong in his
life. And Tortorella kind of after that game. I mean, in fairness, he didn't. And I believe this, by the way, because Tortorella's not standing there looking for the super slow-mo replay that everybody else got in the immediate. Right. So sure, if he didn't see it directly, I understand that.
And you
But
don't expect a coach to come out and rip your guy. You're gonna have your players' backs.
More
often than not.
It sounded like at the very least that there was a reason to understand that somebody had understood what had happened. Maybe one of the other players on the ice at that moment. Because let's remember something. DeAngelo kind of got bowled over after that, like a wave of 5 members of the Tampa Bay Lightning, Perry included, by the way.
Yeah,
we're after you, and most of the rest of the team didn't exactly jump in like, well, we're going to turn this into a full out brawl. It's
and talking about players who get under your skin, and nobody does it better than Corey Perry.
Well, yeah, Perry's known for that. Yes, I get that. So, but either way, so Tortorella didn't exactly have a full on.
I'm sorry, that's the thing though. If you're going to be DeAngelo and you're going to engage in that game, you can't do it with Corey Perry because he's better at it than you.
And either way, even that's kind of irrelevant to the point. Also, but Tortorella didn't really have a defense this time. Tortorella kind of just we like him to play that way we like him to play that way as long as he doesn't cross the line.
Yes,
and
he got jumped by 5 Tampa Bay Lightning, and there were no Flyers there.
That's what I was getting.
There was no defense. There was no teammate standing up going, "Hey, get off our guy." I was like, well.
But from this point in the season, there are 18 games left at that point. He gets suspended for the next 2.
Yeah.
So that takes care of 2 of them. Then he plays the next 11 and then sits out the last 5 as a healthy scratch.
No, that night was his last night as a Flyer. I know he played out those 11 games, but that was the end of it for him.
Well, and just to kind of not keep going with this, but think about this for a minute. I think I don't know if that was necessarily his last night as a Flyer. I think it really was ultimately when the healthy scratch thing came down in the last 5, and they had every reason to potentially change it at any given point to like you could have sat somebody else.
Oh, he could have played any of those games.
Right. You could have sat somebody else if you were really trying to get a look at one younger player.
Yep.
They made their decision. And then it's only further. Seriously. This goes back to Provorov and Hayes to an extent, too, because they're the other 2 guys that have essentially left. If you look at the subtractions, the legitimate subtractions, 3 of which had something to say at the end of the year, that they have been moved without it being the last year of their contract. 2 people that are gone, their contract was up and they just didn't stay because the writing was on the wall in that respect. But it was just your contract's up. Not that we hate you.
Right.
There's no hard feelings with James and Reams. It's just your contract's up. You're in your 30s.
I assume you want to go win hockey games somewhere.
And we're not going to pay you.
Right. Even though, what did he sign for? 1 year, $1 million in Boston?
Exactly.
So, I don't know. I think that's a JVR decision because if you're the Flyers, I think you offer him that and say, "Hey, do you want to come be a good mentor, be a good role model, be a good locker room guy?"
See, I don't see it that way, and the reason I don't is because I don't think even if it is 1 year and it's kind of a throwaway year like we've already seen it to be, it's not something that I see them that's not the guy I see them saying, "Well, we really want to hold on to somebody who can guide."
That's fair.
That's what
listen. I just want a local kid so bad, and Tony screwed it up so bad that JVR is our next best hope.
I guess. It is what it is.
Johnny's in Columbus, Well,
you had your shot at that.
Man.
It cracks me up because you're not going to sit there and tell me that last offseason they weren't positioning themselves to do something big. And the biggest thing they did was Tony DeAngelo, who a year later was bought out.
Hey, something else I want to mention about something else I want to mention. Yeah, something else I want to mention about the last offseason of Chuck Fletcher. Okay, 2 years from now, Claude Giroux signs a 1-year contract as a Philadelphia Flyer.
I don't know.
What was the big story when he got traded? He made it clear that he was informed that he would not be welcome back. That's a Chuck Fletcher decision. I don't think that's a Danny Briere decision. I could see him coming back for 1 more year. Knowing how it ended, if he has a good couple years in Ottawa, I think he's got 2 years left on that deal. If he wants to play 1 more, come on, Danny.
I'd say we'll see. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not trying to think that far ahead. I mean,
I know.
You're talking 2 years left on that contract anyway, so like let's not even go there. But
you're
but
right.
hold on. Let's go to the benefits of this because okay, so now I'm telling you where I think things changed for DeAngelo. Where okay, so bottom line is, I think that like the decision's already been made, right? Like it's every player that has been moved on, basically moved on from at this point in the offseason has been done so with, I think, the writing on the wall enough.
Right.
I'm not going to say that the writing was 1,000% on the wall for Provorov. I think it was just the right deal comes along and they weren't hesitant. That's what I think that means.
Yeah.
But for Hayes, it was always there, and for DeAngelo, I think it was always there because Hayes had. What did we say? Hayes had said at exit interviews last show when the trade, once we had to talk about a finalized trade, that he goes, "We'll probably, I think their decision's already been made. I'll probably find out around the draft."
Yep.
And in DeAngelo's case, I don't think like DeAngelo had said all along, I want to still play here.
Sure.
But I also think that when you also come out with, I think it was totally ridiculous that I didn't play the last 5, which right or wrong, like it didn't have to be him for the final 5. I get that. Right or wrong, it tells you that there's a relationship issue.
You can only get away with saying that if the coach is getting fired. And like if the coach is still going to be there, that's a sign that relationship is deeply broken.
Right. And you know that answer. So
right. Right, exactly. John Tortorella wasn't going to be going anywhere.
Right. Now, in fairness, and I'm not trying to defend DeAngelo or Kevin Hayes in this case, but because both kind of qualify, you do want to be, and I said this when Danny Briere was hired and when officially hired, and when all of the other stuff, like with the press conference, was going down with the new era and all that stuff. You do want to be careful about the influence the coach has on roster construction going forward. These two moves in particular, Hayes and DeAngelo, feel like I can't work with them.
Yeah, and it also feels like a little bit of locker room surgery, I think.
It probably is, but how much of the locker room surgery is done based on what the coach feels like in terms of I can't get through to him, so what the hell happens to the rest of the guys? You know what I mean?
I don't mind the coach deciding who's not there. I don't want the coach necessarily deciding who is there. Like I'm okay with him going in and weeding out the bad apples. I just don't necessarily want him planting the new tree.
And I understand that. Sense. Yes, no, it makes sense. But what I'm saying is that early on you're seeing how big the influence is, and it's not something that's common for the coach to be a heavy influence on where things go in terms of like it's what make like I think the point of the matter is, and we're going to get into this because it's a topic that I think is fair at this point of how Briere's offseason is gone. A lot of it kind of was expected because you're looking at 2 players gone that everybody's going, well, of course they're gone. Right. Like it felt like that was going to be the case. We felt that from the last game of the season in April, let alone,
everything that's happened since then. Yeah.
Right. So I understand it. It's just a matter of speaking. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. That was expected. We expected those players to be gone.
So now let's go to the benefits of this because what was the better option, or is there a better option? Because
you mean than buying him out? You mean?
Well, right. Because here's the not the obvious, but here's not an easy answer for it. But like think about it for a minute. You're going from Kevin Hayes trade where it was reportedly going to be bigger than what it turned out to be, and you get nothing more than a 6th round pick back, which is still getting something, but it's not the something that you expected.
Yeah, right? When you're retaining for multiple years, and it's right.
And half, and yes, all of it. And in this case, for 3 weeks, you're being told there's a deal in place, and you're going to get something in return.
We had a name. We even had a name for the prospect they were getting back. He wasn't much, but there was a name. We knew who it was going to be.
Yeah, I guess it's if we want to mention it, sure. Yeah, Massimo Rizzo was the name.
Massimo Rizzo, yeah.
Which he
would have fit right in South Philly. Come on.
But in fairness, exactly what we said it was going to be, right? A 7th round pick. So
a long shot lottery ticket prospect.
Long shot lottery ticket. And I told you last week, the belief was he was a guy who wasn't signed yet, so it was a rights deal, and that's exactly what this would have been. This is a guy who's fresh out of college.
Yep.
And
it's a nothing trade. It's the nothingest of nothing trades in terms of what you're getting back.
Well, and in fairness, there was even a connection that made sense because it was a teammate of Bobby Brink's at Denver.
Right.
So it was like, all right, that's maybe some
little
homework.
bit of right. Maybe he'll play with him on the Phantoms.
Done, like, yeah, you see where it goes, et cetera, right? So what does the benefit of, or what are the pros and cons of the buyout of DeAngelo? The buyout of DeAngelo's contract has one specific negative compared to a trade, which is it lasts more than one season.
It extends your cap hit over 2 seasons.
The Flyers are going to have cap money that's going to DeAngelo for this season and next season now, as opposed to just trying to wipe away the contract this year via trade. However, the cap hit is lower. This season, it's just a $1.67 million cap hit, as opposed to the $2.5 you were going to retain. Now, it will also be $1.67 million next year, which is $1.67 more than you were going to spend.
Right.
So it's not big picture, long run. It's not cheaper than $2.5 million for 1 year, but it is a lower cap hit this year,
and it is cheaper than $5 million for 1 year.
Oh, for sure.
If you just hold
and really the biggest pro out of this decision is what is the last point that I have, which is it does prevent the Flyers from having to use a retention spot on DeAngelo, which could be valuable later. They were going to only have one retention spot left if this trade goes through, because they're already using one on Hayes, and they were going to use a second on DeAngelo if the trade had gone through. Now you go through with the rest of the season, the rest of this current offseason, and into next season, and obviously pushing to the deadline with 2 retention spots, which.
Yep.
And I've been saying since this trade went down that Sean Walker's a prime candidate for this at $2.65 million with a year left. That when you get to the deadline, why wouldn't you eat half of that and say, "Hey, team that's in the playoff picture that wants a contract for a defenseman for $1.3 million, we got you covered." Sure. Why wouldn't you do that? And
for the record, on the contract, on the cap hit on DeAngelo, I know we were talking about that. We don't necessarily expect the Flyers to spend to the cap, so I don't think the cap hit is particularly relevant. What is worth mentioning, though, is how much cap space they do have available, just because we've seen a rise in recent years of teams being a third team in a transaction and picking up an asset. We saw the Minnesota Wild do it in, I believe it was the Ryan O'Reilly trade to Toronto. We see it all the time where teams will act as kind of that banker third team and pick up a third-round pick to retain $2 million for a year or whatever it is. The Flyers are a team that can very easily be doing that through the course of their rebuild.
Well, sure, correct. And LA this offseason, I mean, helped you get Ivan Provorov to Columbus.
Exactly.
With, way less money for Columbus to be paying. So there you go.
And that's the kind of thing.
And that's exactly the fair point as well. Exactly. It's not just about your own guys and who can you trade and retain on. It's
and who can you get with that cap space.
Right. It's also when the deadline rolls around, if somebody's really looking for something for a 1-year rental player who is maybe top of the charts, the guy you go after. And do you call or do you either take calls or do you start making calls if you know some stuff and say, we can be the buffer here? For that 1 year.
And make this deal work for everybody in terms of cap.
Like, guess what? You're going to give us this guy. Or not
You're going to give us a second-round pick.
Right. You're going to give us a pick for doing this for you, doing you a favor.
Right. And I don't necessarily think the Flyers will be in on a third team for like an Erik Karlsson, because it is retention for so long. But if you see any deals.
It's 1 year.
Right. If you see any deals where 1 year, maybe even 2. If you're willing to pay for it. But yeah, at that point, you're looking at probably a first-round pick if you're retaining any sort of salary for 2 years, just because it takes up one of those retention spots we keep talking about.
Exactly.
But, okay, so is there anything else we want to address here on DeAngelo? We've kind of...
Nope.
Okay, I feel like we've kind of touched everything. He is out of town. He will...
as far as we know, the buyout, basically, I don't think there's really ever formal announcements of these things. Like, they already expressed their intentions were for a buyout. Right. So now that he's cleared waivers, it's
and he did clear waivers as of Saturday. I assume there's some paperwork to be done, but he is bought out.
Right. Cap Friendly has it done. It's on the buyout books. So there you go.
Then he is free to sign with another team, and I imagine that will probably wait until the Erik Karlsson deal is done. Just because it has implications all over.
Well, we'll see, to be honest, because here's another thing about it. At this point in time, look, DeAngelo gets his money one way or the other to an extent, right. Like you're getting money. So at this point, would he even just take a vet minimum contract, to play for Carolina?
Not if somebody's willing to offer him more, but I get what you're saying.
Well, and I don't know how many teams are. Is the point?
Well, I think there's a real chance that kind of the two big teams in on Erik Karlsson right now are Carolina and Pittsburgh, and I think whoever doesn't get Karlsson might get DeAngelo.
It's possible. See, I can see Carolina now even jumping back into this thing. And listen, on the surface.
But then here's the thing: if you trade for Karlsson, then your right side is Burns, Karlsson, DeAngelo.
I hear you.
Not a lot of defense on that right side, and you're trading away Brett Pesce to make that happen. That bottom six, that six makes me nervous. That's a lot of offense in and a lot of defense out.
Maybe, I don't know. Like, it's tough. It's tough to decide how this is going to go because he's got a reputation. He's been bought out twice. How many teams are going to sit there and say, well, let's put it this way.
That's fair.
Obviously, the two teams that have bought him out previously are probably going to say, no, we don't want you. And obviously he's not going to be a Flyer next year if they bought him out. But
and we keep talking. We've talked about this player before, and we've talked about the fact that he's on his fourth or fifth chance if you go back far enough.
Well, this will be his fourth team or fifth team if it's new. Fifth team if it's new.
But also, this one isn't ending in scandal. I mean, yes, he didn't get along with his coach, but this isn't him fighting a teammate. This isn't him using racial slurs. This isn't these things that he has been released for before and come back from.
Right.
This is just, I didn't get along with my coach. I guarantee you there's a dozen teams around the league going, oh, we can fix that. We don't have John Tortorella. We'll be fine.
Well, and that's why Carolina would possibly be interested because at the very least, I'm not saying you stick him next to Jacob Slavin again now that you have other players on that roster now, but you do know how he worked with Rod Brind'Amour.
Toronto.
Oh boy.
They're always looking for some juice from their back end. They're looking for some snarl in the playoffs. They're looking for some scoring help.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I don't.
Or he'll sign in Boston because why not? Tell me he's not. Him and Milan Lucic on the ice at the same time. My goodness.
Yeah, that'll go over. Yeah, then I can't wait to find out what Brad Marchand thinks.
Did you see the pictures of Milan Lucic walking through the streets of Boston? Did you see that
video? Yes, I did see it.
Looking like Gru from Despicable Me.
The shoulders are just
man. Listen, Milan, please don't kill me. But that is an enormous man. Enormous man.
I'm pretty sure that but saying it that way, I think that he would take that as a compliment. There were other things I saw that were said about that video that he's not going to. I don't think he's going to get mad at you saying he's an enormous man.
I mean, I did say he looked like Gru from Despicable Me, so
that's not the worst thing I saw.
That's fair. All right.
Know what I mean,
God, he's gonna be a Bruin, and it's gonna be infuriating. But let's talk about some guys who are gonna be Flyers for a little bit.
Sure, let's go to the re-signings.
We got some re-signings. We got Noah Cates, we got Cam York, and we got I'm gonna pronounce this wrong. Is it Lycksell? Olle
Lycksell. Yeah.
Okay. Olle Lycksell.
Olle Lycksell. Everybody says, for what it's worth, everybody says Olle.
European Ola, yeah.
Well, remember back at the beginning of camp when he was starting to turn heads a little bit, and we all pronounced it like Olle Jokinen, so we said Olle Lycksell. It's Ola, yes, but nonetheless.
Okay, so
regardless.
Noah Cates, 2 years, $2.625 per year. Mm-hmm. He is currently 24 years old. He will still be an RFA when that deal is done.
Correct.
I think that's a nice little deal. Again, we're talking about bridge deals here. We're not doing anything earth-shattering. We're not doing anything franchise-altering. They could still trade him tomorrow if they wanted to. I don't think they want to. But this doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. He's here for 2 years at a reasonable number.
Right.
He is a piece through the rebuild. They're going to evaluate and see what they've got. And that's kind of the case with all these guys.
Right. So you might as well just read them all off right off the top then. So Noah Cates was the 2 years at $2.625 million. Cam York was 2 years at $1.6 million. and then Lycksell got the typical two-way deal, 2-year 2-way.
Right.
So that's gonna hang on for a couple years like that, and that's nothing more than $787,500. So it's
So
much
all
more
these
bare minimum.
guys, all these guys signed 2-year deals. So
Right.
we talked a lot in our last show kind of about that 3-year window, and this starts setting you up for that, right? This is where you see Danny Briere starting to set up for that.
Yeah, now I saw a lot of stuff. There was a lot of comments about why not go longer term with Cates, I guess.
Well, it's so he's still an RFA afterward, I assume.
It's also that, like, let's put it this way, because I have all this filed, and I didn't write any notes about each individual deal as much. I just wrote more of a kind of why the bridge deal thing, because bridge deals were obviously these are all bridge deals at this point. Everybody got a 2-year deal.
Sure.
You know.
And bridge deals are a fad. They go in and out.
Well, and at this point, think about something for a minute. Has Danny Briere signed a contract longer than 2 years this offseason?
I don't believe
so.
You
know what I mean? So, and we're going to get into free agency around the rest of the league, because we didn't really talk about that much on the last show. We did mostly just the Flyers angle of that. Not a lot of players were getting long-term deals. In fact, and I'll save this kind of more for when we get into all of the free agents and some of the big ones, because we'll talk on a handful that I guess stood out to us. We're not going to go through every signing,
right.
Obviously. But I wrote an article about the bridge deals that the Flyers were making with Cates and York specifically, and actually as of publishing that article, and it changed later that afternoon, of course, but as of publishing the article, had the number of contracts that were signed to that point from July 1st on, and how many of them were more than 2 years, and how many of them were more than whatever number of amount of money. And the numbers were staggering. Like, you're talking about contract numbers in the hundreds, and you're talking about maybe 20 that go to a certain level. You know what I mean? Like,
we see a lot of hockey players betting on themselves.
Yep.
And betting on the cap to take some big fat jumps over the next couple of years.
Well, and one of the things I wanted to say about this is, like, because the cap is expected to rise significantly over the next 2 off seasons, correct? And not only are we and yes, exactly what you just said. That means players are taking chances on their performance, their health, and all this stuff to get a bigger payday. That is true. There is also another angle of that, which is that I believe that the Flyers had full interest in going long term with Noah Cates.
Okay.
I think that they wanted to, and I kind of speculated more along the lines of, let's say Joel Farabee's deal, a 5-year, $5 million a year extension, which is nothing, it's not too, that's probably in the long run, not too much, not too little.
No, it's probably about
just right. And
it might even be a little light if he turns into a 25 or 30 goal scorer, which he's got the potential to.
Well, sure. I mean, he had 13 this year, so you're basically asking if in the next 5 years can he double his goal scoring production, and can he get from, what was he at this year? I think 38 points. Can he turn into 70?
Right.
Because
at that point you're underpaying him at $5 million.
Well, exactly, especially for what for the potential of what he can do defensively. Now, Cates had elected for arbitration, and he was the only player who did. Ultimately, it wasn't needed. But I think that's where the difference was, because I think that the difference in terms of what makes you go to arbitration on this potential contract is the Flyers were probably offering long-term and underpaid in the long term, versus I can take the low pay, but and I don't think this is Cates specifically.
Give me a chance to get a raise in a couple of years.
But I don't think this is Cates by himself. They've got agents,
of course,
right?
Of course. I'm willing to bet Noah Cates didn't have a ton to do with this process. Of course, he had input.
I think that Cates' agent is telling, like with anybody else, is telling any player, in 2 years, look at where the cap is supposed to go and what we could do then.
Right, and the quick little brief explainer for people who aren't keeping up on why the cap is going up. So basically, the cap's been flat since COVID because of all the missed revenue, because of all this and that, and because the owners lost so much revenue that the players owed the money. It's a whole escrow situation that we're not going to dive into all the details on. But they've been paying them back over the last several years. And it's expected that the last payment will be made this fall. And the players will be completely caught up, and they will not owe the owners any more escrow. And then, when all of that is taken into consideration, when they do the hockey-related revenue calculation, all this TV money deal from ESPN and TNT will finally roll in and affect the hockey-related revenue, disregarding that escrow situation because that is now resolved. All that money will roll in as hockey-related revenue, and the cap should be expected to bump pretty significantly. Maybe as high. We've heard estimates in the range of $4 to $4.5 million next year, which after several years of flat or $1 million raises is a monstrous increase.
Let's put it this way, because Cap Friendly does, like, when you look at a team's page on Cap Friendly, they do a full summary, right? And they tell you where the roster stands, all that type of stuff. The salary cap this season went up $1 million, and it's $83.5 million.
Yep.
Next offseason, they have as a projection for the salary cap, the upper limit of it, $87.5 million.
That's a $4 million increase. That is,
and then
5%. That's a significant bump,
just in and of itself. And then the year after that, they have it going to $92 million, which is another $4.5 million. So you're talking about $8.5 million potentially becoming available to teams in 2 years' time.
Well, and that's the offseason we're talking about, these contracts ending.
Right.
So if we're heading into that offseason, going into a season with a $92 million cap,
right,
almost $10 million above where it is today, we're looking at some big contracts. And I think at that point, it's only going up. Like, it's not slowing down at that point for a couple of years, as long as, at that point, we'll see how the TV deals are doing.
Sure.
But Danny Briere, like you said, is keeping everything nice and short.
Well,
nothing long, nothing stupid. Get yourself in a situation to take advantage of all that cap space.
Well, and in fairness, I also think that this is another area where I think the arbitration case would have come in, is I think that if they were going to go short term like they ultimately did, they didn't want to go into, I think Cates would have preferred, or Cates and his agent, let's just say, would have probably preferred the 3-year deal and said, let's go 3, and then he's a UFA.
Yes, exactly.
Now he hits the open market.
And that's why you bring Cates to 2 years, because then you still get a negotiation with him where you're relatively in control.
Right. You still hold the rights. He's an RFA. You can qualify him first.
I was going to say, he can run that trick where he accepts his qualifying offer, plays the 1 year, and walks himself to free agency. But we'll see what kind of player Noah Cates is at that point. And you have 2 full years to negotiate with him.
It also, in fairness, like, usually with RFAs, qualifying offers are formalities, and they know that. And if the camp is going to sit, like if Briere is on the side of the Flyers and Cates' camp is on the other side of this, and he has 2 really good years, and the negotiations start at a really good point, like, honest to goodness, if he does enough to elevate his status over the next 2 years, and I'm not even kidding when I say this, if you're opening up the cap for another near $9 million. And there's other players, by the way, in 2 more years who will be gone also.
Exactly.
So if this is one of your potential foundational pieces, so to speak, and I say that, I'm not saying that like he's the guy who projects to be foundational.
He's one of the first players coming out of your core or out of your rebuild. Yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't feel strange about saying this at all. Don't be surprised if his next contract is in the same vein as what Sean Couturier is making right now. Yep. Seriously. Like, don't be surprised if it's a long-term and near $8 million deal.
And you know what's going to really complement that nicely? Matvei Michkov's 3-year ELC.
Well, sure, you're setting yourself up for that potentially. I mean, that's 2 years down the line. Now, even so, you're building for the long term. You're making that
when Matvei Michkov gets here. Right.
Well, it's everything, isn't it? It's Michkov, it's Gauthier, it's whatever else you get from here on out.
Whoever you draft next year, yes. And I know there's been a long-running joke among Flyers fans about we're 2 years away from being 2 years away. I get it. I know. I've been through all the same pain you have, I promise. This is different. This is a real reset. If Danny Briere wants to, he can completely flip over the entire roster in the next 2 years. Essentially. There's not really a whole lot of unmovable deals there if you really want to.
I mean, let's put it this way. The conversation is going to continue. We think the offseason is mostly done.
Sure.
The conversation is going to continue. And for what it's worth, like, because I do want to point out, like, with with the rest of these contracts first
Yeah,
before we move on, because there's not a lot left to do with these either.
No, I do. Most of what I said for Cates also applies for York.
Well, and I wanted to go into something with both because of the fact that I want to make sure I'm looking at their numbers really quick, because that does kind of play in a little bit. Like we just said, Cates had 13 goals, 38 points. This was his first full season. If you're assuming that things go up, like what's a legitimate, and I'm not trying to say he's going to get there, but what's a legitimate goal for next year already? Can he score 7? Yeah, can he score 7 more goals
20.
and 12 more points? Can he get 20 and 50?
On a team that you expect to be bad, you expect him to play more and more top 6 minutes.
Yep. So
I think 20 and 50 is a supremely reasonable goal for Noah Cates this year.
Well, and by the way, let's not forget also he got signed out of college the year before and played immediately.
Yep.
And in 16 games, I'm sorry, he had 5 goals and 9 points.
Yeah.
Right away. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that he's already near that half a point per game status. And if you're looking for a jump,
and you expect to see a little bit of a jump. I mean, he might not make a huge jump. He might top out as kind of a high-end second-line player. If he turns into, in terms of offensive production, if he turns into Travis Konechny, are you upset about that?
Production-wise, no, absolutely not, because Konechny has 30 goals. Roughly could be 30 goals a year.
That's fair.
Like, honestly, I'm happy with him being.
I'm just talking about his top end, right? He's not a 40-goal scorer. He's not a 50-goal scorer.
No, but then give me kind of what Sean Couturier gives you to an extent, because Couturier is always in that 20 to 30 range. It's not always in the 30s. He could get there. And I'm not saying that I think that means that Cates is going to get there, but if that's what he can turn into, are you going to have a problem with that? I mean, there's a chance that in a couple of years he's not even your best center.
That's fair. I mean, I think ideally you don't want him to be. I could see him as a guy who ends up on the wing too, long term. I like him. He's good in the center, but I could see him.
And here's the thing with
if he's playing in the top 6.
And here's the thing with Cates. If you go look at it, like his ice time last year was like something in the range of 17 minutes, I want to say, per game. That's going to have to take a step up, obviously, if he's going to make bigger money in a long term contract. It's going to have.
He's making real player money now. He's not making prospect with a shot money.
Well, and that's. Well, and there's balance. There's balance to that. I mean, you don't want him playing 20 minutes a night if you're not going for the win per se, right? Like if it gets. Well, no, I'm saying if a game gets.
I'm fine with him playing 20 minutes most nights just to get the reps.
You know what I mean, though. I'm saying if a game gets out of hand, then you balance it out, and it's next thing you know, you're just resting guys a little extra, and don't push the envelope.
When a game gets out of hand, that's what Garnet Hathaway is here for. That's what.
Well, yeah, I know, but you know what? But that's what I'm saying. You're going to see the guys who don't play like that play more when the game is a little bit more out of hand.
That's
the other thing has to, like, again, you'd like to see a boost to the offensive numbers for the long-term deal, and maybe this goes to your point because it could influence it down the line, but he's been a center the whole time. His face-off percentage is a little low right now. Get it up, get it higher. Get it. Well, can you get it to the 50% threshold that makes you more successful in face-offs than not?
I would also be interested.
And then we'll talk.
I would also be interested to see him play alongside, and not literally alongside on the ice, but play on the same roster at the same time as Sean Couturier.
Sure.
We can rub off on him a little bit.
And we could find that out as soon as this season. So that's
sure. Well, and I think I think Sean Couturier at this point is your leader. I'm looking at this team, and whether he wears the C or not, especially, I think he's probably going to be your leader on the ice. I don't know about his role in the locker room, of course. I know Scott Lawton is a big voice. But if Sean Couturier can come back and be relatively healthy and step up, that'd be nice to see.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know the answers by now. I mean, you know who the most veteran guys are. Couturier's one of them. Cam Atkinson's another. Scott Lawton's another.
Who said he expects to be ready for the season opener, by the way? Atkinson.
Yes.
We'll see about that.
Well, everything with those guys is a we'll wait and see. I mean, I am not sitting here, at the very least, I'm not sitting here banking on getting 82 out of all of those guys.
I have a pit in my stomach when it comes to Sean Couturier. It's not something I'm wishing. It's not something I'm hoping for, but I just have this sinking feeling he's not going to be playing a whole lot more hockey.
And you could be right about that. You could be wrong about that.
And I don't know anything.
And there's no way. And the other thing is, it's really hard to know anything in the summer. while they're on their own and doing their own thing for the time being. It's different story when we get to training camp in September and we can start really documenting certain things. Hey, this is what is going on over at practice, or
they tell us Ryan Ellis is going to play for the 400th time.
I don't think they're telling anybody that this time around.
I know. I'm pretty sure he's LTIR retired here.
Pretty much. Yeah. And that's kind of beside the point. And then so I guess sort of my point was, so you looked at Cates' contract and what he's given. Go to Cam York for a minute, and Cam York had 54 games last year, 2 goals, 20 points, which is for 54 games to 20 points is actually kind of nice when you think about it.
Not bad,
right? And overall, last year at the AHL career AHL. Last year at the AHL he played 20 games, 3 goals, 13 points. Career AHL is 62 games, 7 goals, 30 points. And interestingly enough, NHL is 87 games, 5 goals, 30 points. So he has the same number of points at both leagues, by the way. Different game totals. But this is what I was getting at.
He's also gotten more comfortable the more he's played at the NHL level.
Oh, sure. No question. The thing is you can look, and I don't know if I'm trying to think if this is, you can count the games. I listed for Cates. You can count the games, 82 this past season, a full season, and then 16 at the conclusion of his college career when he signed after playing in college. So do the math, and I can do that math quick enough. It's 98. So he's got less than 100 games, and now I just said with York, it's 87. Are you making these big-time long-term commitments to 2 guys with less than 100 NHL games? Oh, when everything is cap is firm right now, got to ride it out kind of thing. Are you making that right now? Probably not. So, this is exactly what it is. This is the let's see what they've got kind of, thing. And I think for York, it makes way more sense.
Does Cam York run power play 1 this year?
He should. They do need. They need to work. One of the things that needs to be done with Cam York, and it's a conversation I've had in the press box multiple times. Not necessarily coming from me, but I've heard I've been part of conversations about this very topic. They need to work on his shot because his shot doesn't have the accuracy that it needs to be a power play quarterback.
I also don't think he has the confidence in it.
Well, that's fair too, but that's why you get him a specific
get him a shooting coach.
Well, exactly, but you know how they do these skills practices. Sometimes they don't make it a full coach.
Somebody get this man a shooter tutor.
Pretty much though. You need to. That's one of the areas that he needs to work on. I think he's actually been pretty fine, all things considered, everywhere else. I'm saying fine, not great.
Right. Well, and give the kid a chance. This is his first time going into an offseason knowing that he's very likely to have an NHL job on day 1 the following year. He can spend the entire offseason kind of working on his skills and developing himself up with the confidence of knowing that he's not going to have to grind through Lehigh Valley for 2 months.
Well, exactly. He hasn't had the benefit of playing a true full season yet. Once he got called up this past year, yes, he did get to play the rest of the year.
He's up now, right. But it's different when you have the off season.
And it's different when you go in and feel like you can see, I'm going to use this again because the writing is on the wall with this one as well to an extent, but in a different way. Not the writing's on the wall you're getting sent out somewhere. I think the writing's on the wall that he's making the team out of camp.
Absolutely.
Instead of being a question mark, last season it was, is he gonna make? And then he ultimately didn't.
Right.
Tortorella put him through the ringer, and then he didn't make it.
And I think it will help his confidence going through training camp, watching other guys get sent down, watching other guys kind of fall away, knowing that he's not, that he is secure, that he is going to be there. He can pick his, he can get his locker stall situated, knowing he's not going to have to move it. He's on the roster. And I think that'll be good for him.
Well, exactly. And that's important. It's important for him to know that. And it's important for him to be, in that position and all of that. So,
sure.
And I think that, when you saw, I'm trying to remember which one came first because they weren't announced at the same time. They were announced on the same day, not at the exact same time.
I think it was.
Cates was first. Yeah. So when Cates comes out, you're like, okay, it avoids arbitration. You knew he was probably looking for a bit of a bigger payday, and I wonder if they would have if he would have taken a little less money than the 2.625 for 3 years.
Probably.
To have the
2.4.
Because he didn't want the long-term deal, but I think he also maybe like they were trying to figure out a way to get to that 3-year mark. So I think they had to up the money to get him to agree to 2, and that's what it came down to. One of the things I do believe, when York's came out, is I thought that like just hit right on the money. Like, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that value. It feels right. Everything about that contract feels right. I'm not saying that it doesn't feel right about Cates's, but I think that with Cates's, you knew that there was a lot more in play. Like, I don't think York was out there actively hunting for get me to UFA status, get me to long term. I think it was straight up like, hey, listen, you haven't played that much.
And
here's 2 years and $1.6 million,
and like we mentioned before, if you did overpay somebody a little bit right now, it's unlikely to really affect the team, especially just over 2 years. They're not going to be up near the cap. It's not going to be a problem. So it's not like, if Kate should have been making 2.3, that $300K is not going to cost you because the Flyers aren't going to be within $5 million of the salary cap, I'm pretty sure. So,
well, right.
Okay, so and then Lycksell is a solid signing. He's a fringe guy. He might make the roster at some point. If he's anything more than a third liner at his peak, I'd be kind of surprised.
He's not the biggest noisemaker. He got some attention in camp last year. Did get a chance to play, obviously, at the NHL level. He, to me, seems like the type of guy right now, especially for the guys that we just mentioned who are supposed to come back. He seems to me like the type of guy that will play ultimately at some point because you deal with a few injuries.
Sure.
And that's when you're going to look around and say, who can we call up?
And your organization isn't exactly the deepest at the moment. They're in the process of shipping guys out. They haven't really brought a whole lot of names in.
No, but I do think you're going to have guys like Tyson Forrester's a prime candidate for this. You're going to have guys who graduate pretty much off the top.
Pretty aggressively.
Right, like, and become part of it. Like, I almost start to factor Forrester in, and like, because to me,
that'd be exciting.
Well, to me, I think like the way that he played when he got called up briefly, he'd have to fall off a cliff from that level to not make this team out of camp now.
That's how you sell tickets in a rebuild. You sell it around hope and the young guys, and I think Tyson Forrester will be one of those names that I don't know if the Farg will be full this year because
yeah.
But I think it's more full because Tyson Forrester's playing.
I think it's a reason to come watch.
Yeah.
Exactly. I do think it's a reason to go and watch and see what he's got and all that stuff.
But absolutely. I could also see him maybe getting the York treatment where he's down for the first couple
months,
first couple weeks, first couple months, and then comes up and hits the ground running. So
it's possible.
Anything else on the RFAs here? We did also probably want to mention there is one unsigned name. It's Morgan Frost.
Oh yeah.
We kind of expect that to get resolved. We haven't heard anything to the contrary. I don't think he's signing an offer sheet necessarily.
No. I think if nothing else, I think the only thing that's left for discussion is what's the deal look like. I would be shocked if it's not in the same 2-year term. The money is kind of, like
he's probably going to get more than Cates.
Close, yeah. I don't know how much. That's kind of what I was thinking, because you got to remember something. He turned it on late in the season, got to 20 goals. That's a big deal.
I wonder if it's another situation where the Flyers are kind of pushing for a little bit of a longer term deal, because like, would you do 5 or 6 years on him at $5 million like you would do for Cates?
I don't know, only because okay, he didn't reach 20 goals exactly. He got to 19. My bad.
Okay.
But either way,
interesting because you said you would do 5x5 on Cates. Would you do that? You wouldn't do it for Frost?
Only because I haven't seen the consistency. Like, the consistency finally started to come around in the second half with Tortorella. I think you need to see that continue.
An injury?
What, Frost?
Yeah. Was he
hurt? Not last year.
Okay.
Because
I don't disagree with you. It almost seems like he's been a little bit of a slow start on his NHL career.
Well, and in fairness, also, you're talking about a guy who also, same thing, just completed his first full season.
Right. Also played the yo-yo game.
Well, because let's put it this way. he had 20 games in the year that they had the really successful run. They kind of didn't need him up because they were playing so well down the stretch of that season. They didn't need him to play at the NHL level in 2020.
Right.
Then the shortened 56 gamer in 2021, he basically played in the minors the entire time. He got hurt. That was the year he got hurt.
Yes.
And didn't really, and so he only played 2 games. He was hurt. That was the end of that. 21-22, he plays 55, but again, the numbers don't line up for this. He gets, 55 games is well over half of the season.
Yeah.
5 goals, 16 points. He plays a full season now under Tortorella and gets you to 19 and 46. That's way bigger of a jump. And
I think Tortorella deployed him. I think Alain Vigneault spent a lot of that year kind of coaching for his job and making decisions for getting wins more than necessarily the good of the long-term roster. And I think Morgan Frost spent a lot of that year in the bottom 6, not getting a whole lot of important minutes, kind of got pushed down.
Sure.
And I think last year with Tortorella, where he had a little bit more of a chance to blossom, is a more true indicator of who the player is.
Sure, and I think you just want to see it all carry out.
I agree.
He needs to have a bigger role, or continue to have a bigger role, I should say, is what more of what it is. Like now that you feel like you can elevate him into that level because of the way that the team looks, I think you continue to do that. He's another guy who, again, like in terms of playing center versus wing, because he could play both, realistically speaking. And if you're going to try him as a center, which right now, I mean, let's just like, depending on what happens with Couturier, he may be your second or third.
Yeah.
Let's just say if Couturier is not playing at any given point, then Cates is 1 and Frost is 2 again.
Probably.
Right?
Yeah.
And again, this is a guy who at one point in time, his faceoff percentage was not far off from the 50s,
Right.
And it dropped this year. You got to get back on that. If you're going to be a center in the NHL, you got to have a decent enough faceoff percentage and not be out there losing, 8 in a row.
And that's where hopefully Sean Couturier can come in, because he has consistently been one of the better face-off guys in the league, and hopefully he can impart some wisdom there.
But that's where I kind of leave this one with Frost, too. I think Frost is in the same boat where I think at this point you're still playing the show me something kind of deal, especially with the money commitment. I think that if you want to give him $3 million for 2 years, you're fine with that. I remember getting a question, not to try to go all the way back to the beginning here, but when DeAngelo got bought out, the question was, does the extra money help them with Frost? And I kind of thought, I don't think it made a difference. I think they were under the cap enough that they would have been able to sign him. What it does open up is once you get the $2.5 million and you get the extra money on top of it that they got by doing the buyout, you have a little bit more added flexibility. There's 2 things. One, whatever Frost wants or whatever you're going to give him, I think now you can firmly say you will get there underneath of the cap threshold, that you don't need to make any decisions. Like you can decide when the season starts, here's our roster, and we can move Ellis to LTIR right away and not have to play York is waivers exempt, so we can send Cam York down with 1.6 mil on paper just to make this move, and then they're not going to be that up against the cap now.
Absolutely not. No.
And that's what I think is important.
Absolutely. So that kind of puts a nice little bow here on this. So that brings us to kind of the overall picture. Now, obviously, we've talked about the fact that there is still Morgan Frost unsigned, so Danny Briere is not quite done with the responsibilities he has this offseason. And obviously that's setting aside any sort of trade that we may see. Right. But generally speaking, how do you think he's done so far?
So I guess I want to start off with the reason why this is such a big topic of conversation. Yes, we're kind of at the point where you can evaluate it. Yeah. But
I think we should cap this off with a letter grade, by the way.
Oh, you want to see? You can, I guess. I wasn't going to, because if you want me to answer the question straight up, I think Danny Briere has done a fine job.
I agree.
A fine job. It's not go out and scream from the mountaintops how great it is. It's not terrible. It's right in the middle. I
got him at a B-.
I think that's fair. That's relatively fair. It's not outstanding, but it's not terrible.
You
right?
lose a couple points for the Carolina trade falling apart, which wasn't really his fault, but it is what it is. And you lose a couple points for Kevin Hayes, because that's not a great trade. You're retaining for 3 years. You're retaining half for 3 years, and all you got back was a 7th round pick.
Right, and I think this is where I'm going, and this is where I'm going with this in my notes, because if you're saying B-, I think that's accurate. Like, it falls in the range of it. It's fine. It's not great. It's not bad. It's
Your
fine.
RFA contracts were solid. Insane deals.
So here's the thing. How do we get here? Because there was a lot of conversation. Because there's people who sit there and like. And in fairness, I understand why there's people on both sides of the spectrum. There's people who look like, and I think there's people taking it to extremes, by the way. Like, in terms of the Hayes trade and the DeAngelo trade, like, not being what they were supposed to be, or this falls apart, or better yet, this much information being out there is leading people to believe this is, loose lips in the organization, got to tighten it up, all that stuff. And I understand where that comes from. I get it. I don't think that was really all on Briere completely. I think that's, you're working with another team. I mean, let's put it this way. You're worried about the Carolina trade. Don Waddell told you it was in principle done.
Right.
So whose fault is that? Whatever.
Right. That certainly sounds like Don Waddell went, never mind. It's not done yet. It's not on paper.
Or at the very least, that exactly what we thought can happen happens, which is, oh wait, that's out there. I want to wait a little bit on this. This is my backup plan now, or maybe I can do both, but I got to wait until this gets done first before I can do the other. So
absolutely.
So you're just stringing somebody along. I understand it. And on the opposite side, I do think there's also people out there who are going to start, and this is going to happen. Because this is what happens in the social media world that we're in and things like that, where people are going to be one side or the other, and maybe to the extreme. That there's going to be people that think it's a great offseason just because of what's no longer around.
I think
you're taking out the trash, so to speak, right?
I think addition by subtraction has some value to it, because we all agree that the Ivan Provorov trade was fairly spectacular, right, in terms of return.
I think it was really good. Yes, it was really good.
Okay,
I'll say it that way.
You get rid of Kevin Hayes, you get rid of Tony DeAngelo, and you get rid of the guy who sat out a game of warm-ups this year. We're not going to get into all that again.
No, we don't need to do that. And that's not even the reason for the trade specifically.
I understand, but I wouldn't be surprised if it had a little,
Well, they said they said it didn't, but that's.
But
whatever.
I think we're looking.
We don't need to rehash all that.
I think we're looking for a culture reset. I think I've talked about Kevin Hayes running this locker room for the better part of the last 5 years.
And somebody stepped in and told you whose locker room it really is, kind of, yes.
Right.
Well, that's where the coach thing came from. Was what we talked about with Tortorella. Like, it's as much that has as much to do with culture as it does with how good of a hockey player they are.
Absolutely.
Like, seriously. And here's the thing, like, I want to use this as an example of how the offseason is going, because I laughed at this when I saw it. I don't know if you saw it. I don't remember if this came over in the group or not, but I remember seeing it, and I got a laugh out of it, because it's from Steve Dangle. So you know that I'm already going to say something good. This came out the afternoon after DeAngelo was placed on waivers, unconditional waivers for purposes of a buyout, right?
Okay.
Danny Briere, he tweets, Danny Briere's summer is giving big guy who just bought a house and is slowly discovering all the stupid DIY stuff the previous owner did energy. And then followed it up with a reply.
Dangle bought a house about 2 years ago, by the way.
Okay. And it's followed up with like a quote as if this is Briere saying
right.
It. It's fine that there's a bike rack, but it's in the kitchen and I don't have a bike.
Facts.
You know what I mean? Like, and I got a laugh out of that because, well, and here's the thing. You're saying Dangle bought a house like maybe 2 years ago.
Or about a year ago, something like that, yeah.
Oh, hello. I bought a house like about a year ago, and I know exactly what you're talking about. Nonetheless, so let's kind of go through the trajectory here of the offseason and kind of how we get, like, especially how I get to the term, it's fine. You know what I mean? Because the Provorov trade, in light of what you were just saying, I think set expectations a little bit high. There was, a lot of information was out there at that point. They were open for business. The Provorov trade in and of itself was complex and creative and got the Flyers what they really wanted, which was another first-round pick.
Got retention, like all sorts.
And got what you really wanted, another first-round pick.
Yep. And you didn't pay anything, not really anything more than Ivan
actual
Provorov
players,
to do it.
Right.
Right.
Well, it was Ivan
Hayden
Provorov and two minor league players, basically.
My boy Hayden.
to do everything else. And yes, look, yes, did you take on contracts in return for it? Of course you did. But you got what you really wanted. The other first round pick was the big piece of the deal, and you got what you really wanted.
Yep.
When the reports of the Hayes trade to St. Louis were surfacing, it really almost did feel too good to be true that this many pieces could be on the move in such a blockbuster. It turned out to be a little
Too good to be true.
Well, hold on. It turned out to be a little less than having 4 current roster players in the deal, but the idea that Hayes and Sanheim were going and another first round pick was on the table was equally as impressive.
That's fair.
When the Hayes deal fell apart with Torrey Krug not waiving the no move clause, and I think it Danny Briere if he traded Kevin Hayes and Travis Sanheim after Ivan Provorov, didn't care about the contracts coming back as much. If he somehow, and you didn't care, or maybe I'm saying the fans didn't care about the contracts coming back as much. If Danny Briere somehow or other goes 2 for 2 on acquiring first round picks in trades.
Oh, I'd be willing to put him in the Flyers Hall of Fame.
Right. So now, obviously, that didn't happen, and I think fans became sheltered and defensive again in the sense that they'd been scarred so much from the previous era that now you're becoming skeptical.
We got a little excited hearing about this big fat blockbuster, and then got a little burned on it.
Right, and then you throw in the DeAngelo trade that ultimately never happens and turns into a buyout. Like at least the Hayes trade happens. It's not what you thought it was going to be, and then you kind of become a little, I don't know now. I'm a little, skeptical of everything.
A little gun shy, right?
Sure. And then the DeAngelo one that was always on the table falls. It doesn't happen. They walk away. It turns into a buyout, and again, it's a bit of the same feeling that there was something out there that was supposed to happen and then didn't happen.
Right.
So here's the simple answer, and this goes back to the tweet that we were just reading, the Dangle tweet. Briere's first offseason was always going to be about cleaning up what he could. There's a part of me that sees the Provorov trade a little bit as a bonus because I wasn't completely certain that he was going to be traded. I knew, like we just said, writing was on the wall with Hayes and DeAngelo. We knew they were gone in some capacity.
Right.
But was Provorov a definitive he's gone, or was it going to be more 50-50? And that's kind of what I was feeling. Another important thing about Briere's offseason, and this is really why I kind of find some of this to be a little futile, is everything that he did that will be a part of the Flyers today is fine in terms of the offseason.
Yep.
If everything works out with Matvei Mishkov, his first offseason is going to be great and borderline spectacular potentially.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, it's the potential play. You're making a big bid on the potential of a player. It's something that will not have a resolution for several years, maybe even beyond the 3 that Mishkov is under contract in Russia, because once he does come over and plays his rookie year, whatever, he could immediately jump right in and be great. Or it could take a year.
Sure.
You don't know the answer yet. So you got to pump the brakes on how good the offseason is because it all centers around Mishkov, and that's the big play at this point. The rest is what it is.
And for the record, we agree that that's the correct play. Like there is no safe option to slowly improve the Flyers. Like you have to take some risks, move some pieces out, make some big risky picks like you did with Matvei Mishkov, make some big risky trades like you did with Ivan Provorov. But that's the kind of thing that if you make enough large but calculated bets and they pay off, that's how you get a successful team.
Sure. And when it goes for everybody, it goes for Mishkov, it goes for Oliver Bonk, who's going to be probably 3 years away from being anything noteworthy at this point. It's all fine. This is rebuilding. Welcome to the rebuild, and you're going to take steps to get there eventually. Like, it's going to take steps to get there. But for now, this is what you're doing.
Yep. And I think Danny is doing a good job. I think we all kind of agree that he might not have handled everything perfectly, but he's got the ship pointed in the correct direction.
And this is an open-ended question, by the way. Like, It's still an open-ended question because you can get through certain parts of this. Like, there's no saying that this means they're done making trades.
I was going to say, and the offseason's not even done. Like, they could still go out there and trade Travis Sanheim or whatever. It's harder now, but...
Well, and the bulk of the offseason's done, so most teams, like I even saw it kind of pitched as if once Danny Briere can get Morgan Frost signed, it's set up with the way that the cap is, that he can get Frost signed and go sit on the beach for the rest of the summer. if he wanted to. And I understand that that's not what they're doing. Like, you know what I mean? But like,
That might be his plan. Ocean City's nice this time of year.
but either way, like,
he strikes me as more of a Sea Isle guy.
don't they all?
No, because for a long time Sea Isle was dry. So for a long time,
Yeah, fair enough.
no.
Okay, fine. Recently, don't they all?
That's fair.
I mean, for God's sakes, I just saw a story the other day because, and this is a good time to get into the rest of the league stuff because, so Bruce Cassidy just had his day with the Cup fairly recently.
Oh my God! Did you see what he came out to?
Yes, the Bruins goal song, right?
He came out to the Bruins goal song. Oh my God! It's so good.
Where I was going with that is one of Bruce Cassidy's assistant coaches is John Stevens, who apparently is having a kind of nice quiet day in Sea Isle City.
Flyers legend John Stevens.
But he's having a kind of quiet sort of day right there.
Stevens seemed like a Sea Isle guy, even when it was dry. Always seemed like a good.
He
dude.
said it was
seemed
good.
like a nice, chill family man.
Yeah, it was. But either way, it's a good like. But it's funny that you're bringing that up, like about sitting on the beach. Also, like we're bringing this up, sitting on the beach for the rest of the summer. That's by the way that's a whole thing too. So, that John Stevens is taking the Stanley Cup to the Jersey Shore.
That's awesome. That is.
I shouldn't say
awesome.
just to the Jersey Shore, to his shore town where he actually has a place.
1998 Calder Cup captain John Stevens.
Yes.
Oh, I had that VHS tape growing up. I had it legitimately like home recorded on a VHS tape. And one day my grandmother recorded The Bold and the Beautiful over it. Pain.
Anyway.
But wait, there's a fun twist ending to that. They wrote a letter to the Flyers. The Flyers sent me like the commemorative tape.
Oh, cool.
With like the official label on it, Calder Cup Championship Game 5, the score, the date. It had the pep rally on the back half of the tape. Classy organization. Anyway,
pretty cool.
Danny Briere's first offseason, again, not quite to a close yet, but kind of through all the big hurdles here.
Yeah, and again, it's fine. He did a fine job to start with, and you know what it is. What you saw was competence. You saw direction and competence, and that's about as good of a first step. Like
revolutionary in Philadelphia.
Well, and that's why I think there's people who go overboard with how good it really was. Right?
It's like, an A++++.
Like it was good. He did a fine job. He knew exactly what needed to get done and did it.
He successfully
as much of it as he could. Right.
Right.
As much of it as he could, and didn't, for things not going completely according to plan or based on the way that they could have gone, like again, you had a deal with Sanheim involved. Sanheim's the only piece he didn't actually move. Like he still moved Hayes and he still moved DeAngelo, despite the fact that it didn't all go through in the same deal or wasn't a trade at all. He still moved the pieces that were intended to be moved, and didn't sometimes you got to turn to plan B, C, D before
Absolutely.
to get something done that you just want to get done.
Absolutely. All right. Speaking of pieces that moved.
Yes, all sorts of free agents.
It's time to play Where's That Player? Kevin, I'm going to rattle off some names. I want you to tell me where they currently play hockey.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, out of memory, you're saying? Or
I mean, if you can, yeah.
I have the cap-friendly list up, and but I'm looking at the very bottom of it from July 1st to go off of where people signed. So if it's not right in front of me, I don't know how long I'm scrolling to find the team. So I'll take a shot, though. I'll see if I can remember. But
we'll start you off nice and easy.
Okay, fine. Go ahead.
Where's Milan Lucic?
Boston.
Okay, he's back in Boston. Where'd Blake Wheeler go?
The New York Rangers.
Okay, I'm keeping it easy. How about Nick Bonino?
Nick Bonino, I think, also went to the New York Rangers.
Yes, he did. Dave Riddick's got a new team.
Oh, that might be one of my first tough ones then. L.A.
Correct. There you go. How about Tyson Jost? Left the Colorado Avalanche.
Well, he left Buffalo. I thought he got waived and then claimed, but he got waived by Colorado, claimed by Buffalo.
Duh.
I believe, he ended up all over the place.
Well, he's in Buffalo. He re-signed in Buffalo.
Oh, is that what it is? He's in Buffalo. Okay, there you go.
Say if he got claimed by Buffalo, I forgot about that, but he re-signed there. So after being bought out by the Vancouver Canucks, where did Oliver Ekman-Larsson sign?
Oliver Ekman-Larsson signed with the Florida Panthers.
That's a good signing for them.
I think that's an interesting one for them. I see the fit for sure. Yeah.
They did also sign, because they love Flyers backup goalies. They did also sign Anthony Stolarz.
Correct.
Which I think is hilarious.
By the way, then do you want me to steal your thunder on one of them then? Because I also know that former Flyer goalie Alex Lyon, who was playing for the Florida Panthers, is now on the Detroit Red Wings.
Yep.
So is another former Flyer. Shane Gostisbehere. Now Shane Gostisbehere. Okay, I forgot about this because I wanted to mention kind of off the top of this free agency stuff because Shane Gostisbehere is going to be one of the exceptions to the rule of this whole free agency period, right? Because this was as of again, I kind of said it was as of the morning after the Cates and York signings went official, was when I wrote an article about the bridge deals that were going on around the league and how everybody was kind of taking a certain deal or whatever. And I'm trying to get the article to load on my phone so I can read the actual numbers because it's being really finicky. I don't know if that's an app problem or if it's a phone problem. There it goes. Okay, here we go. So bridge deals are the current structure, whatever. So as of the morning that I published this, which was July 11th. So now that's fair also, by the way, right? We're about 10 days into free agency. So 10 days into free agency, I have down that there were a total of 244 contracts that were both either listed as standard or 35 plus that had been signed. Of the 244, only 27, and this includes Shane Gostisbehere, had signed for 3 years or more.
Okay. Let's talk about another contract that's 3 years or more. One of the weirdest contracts on free agency day. Who signed Miles Wood?
Oh, Miles Wood, Colorado, I believe.
Yeah, 6 years, 2.5 per.
I got to tell you, by the way, I really do like the fit for Colorado, though. I think the fit is really good.
Some skill, some grit. He'll fit into their middle six beautifully. All right. How about Jonathan Drouin? That's a name we haven't heard in a while here. Where did Jonathan Drouin sign?
Oh, I should know this one because I made a really big deal about this. Like a big deal in the sense that it was just wherever he ended up, it was funny, kind of. Like
Jonathan Drouin signed a 1-year deal for $825,000.
I do know it was low scale.
With the Colorado Avalanche.
That's what I thought. I was going to say Colorado because I think and it was just interesting to see his name. Like I didn't think it was funny in the sense that it didn't make sense. Like it's really a good deal for Colorado. It was just kind of one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, like you know what? It was almost one of those. Oh yeah, remember him? That's what it was.
Next up, we have Stetson's favorite hockey player. Where did Matt Duchene sign after Nashville kicked them out?
Matt Duchene, by the way, I know the answer, and I really like this deal for this team, by the way. It's Dallas. It was 1 year, $3 million. I think it's a really good deal. I think that's such a good deal for them.
I just think it's hilarious that Nashville was like, hey, Matt, we're done. Thanks. And he went, all right, well, where else can I wear a cowboy hat? Dallas. Okay.
Okay. I mean, that's
he absolutely called them. Am I right? Like, there's no way Dallas picked up the phone first.
Sure, I guess. I don't know. I'm sorry. Wait, I'm sorry.
Because we all know he picked Nashville as a culture pick. Like he wanted to go to Nashville because it's Nashville.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm sorry. I made a mistake with the Gostisbehere contract. By the way,
okay.
Gostisbehere did not get term. Gostisbehere was a 1 year deal.
Oh, right. Okay.
But here was the rarity of it. So at the time, those 244 contracts I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Only 52 players signed for more than $2 million.
Wow.
31 for $3 million. 16 for $4 million, and Shane Gostisbehere was one of the 16.
Wow.
At the time. $4.125 million. That was what it was. It wasn't that it was a term deal. It was the money of it because nobody was signing for $4 million on free agency day. Nobody.
How about term and money? This deal is 6 years, 4.5 per. Who signed Ryan Graves?
Oh, the Ryan Graves contract.
Which I think is a terrible contract. Like, he's
So you
28 years old, signed a 6-year deal at 4.5 par. Terrible contract. Ryan Graves is fine, but 6 years?
Yeah, I don't know anybody who is signing a 6-year contract right now. I mean,
The Pittsburgh Penguins.
okay,
Kyle
I'm actually
Dubas.
okay. Because here's well, hang on. I should change. I want to change this back to everybody. No, it still applies no matter what. So it doesn't matter. UFA or every player that was eligible for a contract. The number's still the same when I say this. Do you know how many players got 6 years or more?
It can't have been more than a handful. 8.
It's less. It was exactly a handful. It is
5.
Hello, 5. Yes.
Wow.
And by the way, oh my goodness, this is even funnier.
Scott
5
Mayfield
total.
getting 7 to stay in Long Island. Jeez. Anyway.
Well, this is where I was going with this. Do you realize that 5 contracts were 6 years or more, and 3 of them were the Islanders?
Yeah, because it turns out Lou Lamoriello loves his guys.
Now, in fairness, by the way, I do think one of those is a really good deal.
He also signed a 35-year-old Semyon Varlamov to 4 years.
Yeah, not that one. I was going to say
4 years for a 35-year-old goaltender. Lou, what are you doing?
For what it's worth, the contract I was going to was the other goalie contract was a really good one. Because getting Ilya Sorokin for 8 years at 8.25,
that's a good one.
At his stage of his career, is much better. I understood that one 1,000%. I hear you with the Varlamov one.
Man, Varlamov's an ugly one.
I mean, even Pierre Engvall at 7 years is kind of interesting. I mean, the cap hit's not bad. It's $3 million. That's okay. But like 7-year deals at this point, I mean, that's pretty
rough.
Crazy stuff. I mean, at this point, like let's put it this way. At this point, by the way, the other 2 contracts that are on the 5 that were 6 years or more, the Graves one and Miles Wood.
Yeah.
They're the only 2 that were 6 flat. Like the other ones are 7, which means the only team handing out 7-year deals were the Islanders. That was it.
Friggin' Islanders, man.
There were only 3 more that went 5. By the way, do you want to go with who they are? And one of them's in the same vein as the Ryan Graves one, by the way, because it's one that I didn't get, and it's the same team.
Okay.
So it's the Pittsburgh Penguins again.
Side, yeah.
Tristan Jarry getting 5 at 5.375. I totally didn't get that. I mean,
Jarry?
I just didn't get the term. This is a guy who, as far as I'm concerned, has been rumored to be on his way out for like 3 years running, and you just committed 5 years to him.
I don't get it.
I don't get it.
All right.
By the way, the other 2 that were in the 5, because this is quick stuff, we can do these easily. Another goalie, by the way. You want to take any guesses on who the other goalie was? This is a deal I like, by the way.
No, go for it.
Jonas Korpisalo getting 5 years at $4 million per with Ottawa.
Yeah, that's a solid
I really
bet
like
for
that.
Ottawa.
I do like that. And then the other 5-year deal was JT Compher got 5 from Detroit for $5.1 million.
I think Korpisalo's got the potential to stand on his head at some point, to get hot and run a team through the playoffs. Like, he could be Craig Anderson for them.
Yeah, a little bit. And I think that's something that Ottawa was missing. I mean, now granted, Ottawa's had some other things happen since that deal went down that changed the game a little bit for them. But when you think about when you do think about the overall scope of a younger team, and you think about how the back end is Thomas Chabot and Jake Sanderson, and the front end is, in addition to Claude Giroux being the veteran guy of that group, it's Tim Stützle and
Josh Norris
and all the whole group of them, really.
Eric Brandstrom on the back end. Yeah.
I mean, and it's more than that too, because it's more than just Stützle, obviously. I mean, it's now it's no longer DeBrincat. I get that, but
they'll fill their gap somewhere.
But they've got a lot of young players, and it's a really good team.
All right, I got a good one for you. Flyers legend, 3-year deal.
Yeah.
Where's Radko Gudas?
Oh, Radko Gudas signed in Anaheim.
Yep, the Anaheim Ducks.
Anaheim had another contract that I do want to get into, so I'm looking this one straight up because I know that they do. By the way, they also signed another former Flyer. Do you want to play that one?
I think I saw this and I can't remember. Was it Robert Hagg?
Yep, Robert Hagg got a 1-year vet minimum deal.
Yep, we love that for him.
But this was one of the really more interesting deals to me because on a day when there was not a lot of big term and money thrown around, like we just mentioned, this was one of the more eventful ones. Alex Killorn got 4 years at $6.25 million from Anaheim, which is really interesting. It's interesting because of where Anaheim is, to be honest with you. I mean, Anaheim kind of being one of the bottom feeders of the league last year, still looking to kind of take that jump with some of the younger guys that they have. Like, it's an interesting deal, but I thought that was one of them that kind of falls in line.
A deal that I thought was really interesting. It's another 4-year deal for a veteran player.
Okay.
Who signed Ryan O'Reilly?
Oh, I know the answer to this one. I thought this was a big splash, which means I guess that I can sit there and instead of saying Smashville, say Splashville.
Yeah.
In fairness, that was that. Yeah, I saw that. So I saw that elsewhere.
That's fair.
But Nashville, he signed in Nashville.
To me, that's the one that kind of slid under the radar just a little bit. Ryan O'Reilly going there, like, I think that's a big signing for them. Like, I think
it matters a lot. Yeah.
It's interesting to see him that close to St. Louis, but not back in St. Louis. That's a very interesting decision out of him.
Yeah, it is. I do think so. Yeah. Anybody else we want to have fun with while we keep going through this?
Right. Yeah. Let's see here.
Because I do like this method, so this is fun. Let's keep doing it this way for a couple of months.
I'm still on July 1st, by the way. Okay.
Oh goodness, I have the whole list up.
Dmitry Orlov.
Oh, I know this one as well because we
big money deal.
Actually, this is a little bit of a cheat in a way because we talked about this on the last show.
That's fair.
Because it was Carolina 2 years, 7.75, I believe.
7.75. That's a lot of money.
That was one of the biggest money deals out there. I mean, to be honest, let's play this game now. I'll narrow down all the contracts that were more than $6 million. Okay, and one of these doesn't count because it was a contract extension, not a. Okay. Sorokin was too, by the way. Sorokin wasn't a true free agent.
Right, he got 8 years, so they had to have done it before July 1st.
Sure. Yeah. So we already. So you want to go the money that anybody who's been signed as a UFA that got more than $6 million? We already said Killorn. You just brought up Orlov. We talked about Sorokin, and there's one other player who did, and I think this is very fairly understood because it's a guy who's not going anywhere from the team he plays for. I never would have expected to be, honestly.
I don't remember.
Because can you see Anze Kopitar playing for anybody else besides LA?
No, absolutely not.
So him signing at 36 years old for another 2 years at $7 million per.
Right. No, just because he signed after free agency opened, like nobody else called him. Like it's not. He was never available. He was never on the market.
Sure.
Stop.
What I'm getting at is there was nearly no $7 million contract.
Well, right. That's what I'm saying.
Where it was. Let's play this game then.
Okay.
And I'm looking at a handful that I didn't talk about already. But so Kopitar, Orlov, we mentioned Comfer, Sorokin, Killorn, and Jari all are getting over $5 million as a cap hit. There are 2 more that I didn't mention. Any guesses?
Over 5?
Yes. And for what it's worth, one of them did sign on July 1st exactly, and the other signed the next day. And one of them was a big enough name that it shouldn't be surprising. Like one of them I can see how it would have slipped under your radar because it's not really a big. It's not really a big deal, and B, it's not with a team that you're going to make a big deal about.
Yeah,
so
which one are you talking about?
That's Jason Zucker with Arizona at 1 year at $5.3 million. But the other one was a big deal because everybody was waiting on this, and he got over $5 million, but he was another one who took the short term. It's a 1 year deal. And he guesses who I'm talking about. 1 year, $5.5 million.
1 year, $5.5 million. Oh, Bertuzzi in Toronto.
Correct.
Yep.
Because everybody was waiting for Bertuzzi, like in a way, like it was a big deal that Bertuzzi hadn't signed after day one, and he finally got
was a domino. Yeah, he. And then over the next several days, you see kind of a lot of depth signing. That's when you see Mark Stahl signed with the Flyers. You see, okay.
You want to keep going while we have some fun with this? Because there's one other, like, I'm not kidding. This is how limited this was, by the way. Because I talked about the number of players who got $4 million. I said it was 16 as of July 11th, right?
Yeah.
It's still 16.
Wow.
Okay. Now hang on. It's still 16. We've mentioned every player except for one. Any ideas?
No.
I'll give you a quick hint. It's another player who signed with Toronto.
Klingberg?
Yes.
Okay. Klingberg's fun.
John Klingberg got basically almost the exact same contract that Shane Gostisbehere got.
That's hilarious.
1 year, $4.15 million as opposed to $1.25 million. That was pretty cool.
Hop in the DeLorean and go back to 2018 and tell me that Klingberg and Ghost signed for the same number, and then ask me what the number is.
Sure.
Don't say $3 million.
Now, okay, and now I'm done with the guessing game. So, I've dropped the money number down to $3 million, and guess what? According to this is different. So, a little different. Let me see if there's anybody else at $4 million then, because I was just looking at UFAs, so I'm checking to see. Okay, sure. And we already mentioned his name, so I'm not going to make this a big guessing game. Alex DeBrincat getting his contract extension.
Yep.
At 4 years at $7.875 million in Detroit after getting traded there, which by the way is his hometown team.
Yep.
So okay, I get that.
I did have one more hometown team shout out. Max Domi, 1 year, $3 million in Toronto.
That was where I was going, by the way, because I was dropping it to $3 million, and I was looking at everybody, because one of them, by the way, was one of the RFA deals that got done was recently, by the way, was Keandre Miller got a 2-year deal at $3.872 million cap hit, which is, again,
a super solid deal.
No, but it's a solid deal, but it plays that card, doesn't it?
Yep.
Bridge deal for an RFA.
That's a great deal for them.
So I'm looking at some of the $3 million deals, and let's have some fun with you. By the way, you want to go with another good bridge deal that I think is pretty solid? How about Bowen Byram getting 2 years at $3.85 million as an RFA?
Man, I'm gonna quote Chuck Fletcher here. That's the smallest contract he's ever gonna sign.
Yeah, he's setting himself up for fun, isn't he?
Okay. July 16th, 2023. Is Bowen Byram's next contract $10 million plus?
Ooh.
I think the answer is yes.
I mean, he become the highest paid defenseman on Colorado because Cale Makar signed before that, and that's about the only reason.
Then it.
I mean, they're 1 and 1A at this point. I mean, they're getting close to it. I mean, Byram's really good.
I think it might be 10, and by that point.
With where the cap is? Yeah.
Well, right, because in 2 years from now, if you're his agent, you're not arguing number against Makar. You're arguing cap percentage against Makar.
So I'm trying to look now at some of the other deals. I'm right now I'm on the anything that was more than $3 million, but I do like this. So I'm reading off. Like I said, I'm done with the guessing game portion.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to wrap up.
We've gone through most of the major names. We're about out of here.
I do like the Evan Rodriguez one for Florida at 4 years, $3 million. I think that's an interesting deal. This is one that I thought was a good fit for where he is and for how well the team played. By the way, for the player, for where for what he plays, for the team he's going to, for the term and the deal in general. Brian Dumoulin to Seattle for 2 years at 3.15. I really like that fit. I think Seattle doing what they did in the playoffs last year, adding to that back end is good.
Absolutely.
See if there's any other really good ones on here. Not really in the $3 million range.
Watch out for Seattle, by the way. They've set themselves up kind of quiet, kind of nice. I don't know if you saw, but the Athletic put out an article on some season predictions, and they had Seattle as one of their dark horses. Mm-hmm. Seattle's like plus 4,000 to win the cup right now.
Interesting. So I do want to so one of the things I do want to talk about, maybe we'll start with Seattle, by the way, just in general, because I'm looking at some of the playoff teams from last year and what they did and kind of looking for some of those value plays that they did, especially with the short-term deals, right? So not necessarily anything spectacular on the end of Seattle. Do we want to quickly give a nod to former Flyer Pierre-Edouard Bellemare? Got a 1-year deal there.
Yep.
That's an interesting one.
Nobody loves Pierre-Edouard Bellemare more than Dave Haxtell.
So this was already done, and I think I mentioned this guy's name on the last show, but we didn't say where he ended up signing. I do like the idea of taking a chance at 1 year, $1.5 million for Kyler Yamamoto.
Yep.
For Seattle. I think that's a great option.
Man, Yamamoto might play in their top 6.
Okay, so yeah, he might. There's a possibility. Who knows? So you already mentioned.
If you put him in that top 6 with the skill they have there,
so
holy crow.
So I'm picking playoff teams and going through them really quick and just trying to see if there's anybody we missed. So Toronto, we hit all the big ones. We pretty much hit Domi, Bertuzzi, and Klingberg. We didn't say one though that I kind of want to touch on because this was kind of an interesting deal to me, and I do mean interesting.
Okay.
Ryan Reeves getting 3 years at 1.35 mil per.
Yes.
That's an interesting deal.
It seems as though Toronto, and more specifically Brad Treliving, and by Brad Treliving I mean Brendan Shanahan, is tired of being pushed around.
A little bit, yeah.
Tyler Bertuzzi, Max Domi. Like, what do these players have in common? Like, we talked about it earlier. We talked about it earlier with Travis Konechny. Like, those are both guys that are chirpers. They're going to talk to you. They're going to get in your face. They're going to be in your ear all game. They're going to be trying to get you off your game.
Well,
they're going to be trying to get you to punch them after the whistle.
And by the way, if you wanted any not that it's still a good deal. I'm not saying it's not a good, I'm not saying it's a good deal. But if you wanted any justification as to how Nick Delorier got the 4-year contract that he did, enter Ryan Reeves.
Fair. Yeah.
Like, seriously, like, if you're looking for, like,
but the problem is,
the team still value
the problem is nobody's as good as Ryan Reeves. Ryan Reeves is the only one left
out of that grouping
who is good enough to make it work.
Makes sense. By the way, I looked at a couple other teams. Vegas didn't really do anything specific. Kind of nothing much from Winnipeg either, other than like Winnipeg brought back Laurent Brossoit.
Well, and Winnipeg is another one of those teams that feels like they're not done.
Yeah.
Right. All right, we talked about Hellebuck. They did ship Wheeler out, so that team does change a little bit just because of that from the locker room perspective.
I hear you there. Let's keep going down in order. I'm going in reverse order, by the way, alphabetically, if you can't tell. Just trying to go through the bottom of the list. Tampa with Connor Sherry is a pretty interesting deal. That kind of fits their mold, doesn't it?
Yeah, but they lost some pieces, didn't they?
Oh, they lost a lot of pieces.
Yeah, they got real serious surgery done on their roster, and they're gonna have to fill it from their organization.
That was just one. That was just one I was thinking of. I'm just kind of really quick scrolling through and whipping through each team to kind of see if there's anybody we missed.
We've talked about what Carolina's been doing.
I know.
About them pretty heavily this episode.
Oh, and I'm also trying to go through like if a big name pops up even on a bad team.
Right.
Like, it's worth mentioning.
Right. There were a couple bet on me deals in Arizona.
By the way, so Pittsburgh did a ton, by the way, that we still haven't mentioned.
Kyle Dubas has been very busy.
So like Alex Nedeljkovic signed there as a goalie option. Nola Chari got a 1-year deal, got a 3-year deal there. Nola Chari got 3 years at $2 million. Lars Eller got 2 years at $2.45 million.
Well, you know where Nola Chari played his juniors, right?
Not off the top of my head, as I'm trying to think of it now.
You know who his general manager was in juniors?
Was it Kyle Dubas?
Sure was.
Okay.
He was a Sault Marie Greyhound.
Okay, fine. How about this connection then? Because do you remember the game that got Ron Hextall fired?
Which
game was
time?
That? No, which game was that?
For the Flyers? Okay.
Yeah. You know who it is. You've said it before. We said it recently.
I know what game that was. I can't remember.
He had a hat trick.
Andreas Janssen.
Yeah, so Andreas Janssen signed for 1 year, $800,000 in Pittsburgh. Gee, I wonder why. Who was the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs at that time?
That's right.
You know, a couple from Ottawa we can go into because I forgot again. Former Flyer Zach McEwen signed for 3 years. 3 years in Ottawa at the very base minimum salary, pretty much. So I get it. You know, there was not much else from Ottawa other than that. Did we get on all the Rangers ones? We said. Oh, there's one Ranger we got to mention.
Okay.
That signed. Or actually two then, because one of them made me laugh and one of them made me go, all right, that works. The one that made me laugh was Eric Gustafson got 1 year at $825,000 from the Rangers.
Yep.
The one that I said, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense is Tyler Pitlick got a 1 year, $787,500, you know?
I wanted to mention Tyler Pitlick, by the way. He's 31 years old, and he just signed for his 7th team.
Seriously? We're getting into Mike Sillinger territory here.
That's what I'm saying. He's young enough that he can bounce around for a couple years and get that record broken. But if you click on his page, he had a little stretch at the start of his career, and over the last 4 years, he's played on 6 different teams.
So so now I've scrolled through a couple more teams to find some more noteworthy ones here. I've got a couple of Nashville Predators for you. One is a former Flyer that I feel like we have to mention. That'd be Luke Shen.
Luke Shen, yep.
3 years.
They did sign Cody Glass back, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
That's pretty funny.
The Gustav Nyquist got a 2-year deal at $3.185. That's kind of interesting to me. And then here's a deal that I want to mention because I think it's a really smart deal for them. I think it's a really good take a chance deal. Dennis Gurianov for 1 year at $850,000. Great. Love that deal.
Yep.
Love that decision. 1,000%. Do we want to talk about? I forgot about this guy too, and this one didn't come through until a few days ago. This came through actually on the same day as I was talking about with the article, July 11th.
Okay.
How about the Alex Newhook deal?
Man.
Yeah, Alex Newhook going to Montreal and then signing for 4 years.
That is
interesting deal.
Montreal's
right?
got themselves a good player there. Newhook and Caulfield on the ice at the same time. Come on.
Okay, this cracks me up in a totally different way. There's not really a player we need to mention by name or anything like that because they were literally two-way deals we're talking about. But Minnesota only made 2 signings in the entire period of free agency so far.
Well, they just don't have any money.
Well, that's true.
I believe this is when they're getting hit by the Suter and Parise buyouts pretty hard. I think they have some negative cap over the next couple of years, so their situation is tough.
Okay, so here's what I'm going. So I'm moving on again. So LA, you already mentioned David Rittich, but how about Cam Talbot too?
Flyers legend.
Cam Talbot getting a 1-year, $1 million contract. I gotta know though. Also, by the way, so who's playing goal next year? Because they still have Phoenix Copley.
I
mean, one of them's obviously a replacement for Korpisalo. I get it, right?
But the thing is, in today's NHL, if you don't have an Andrei Vasilevsky, a Connor Hellebuck, a Carey Price...
I know you need 2, but you need 3.
3!
Yeah, but usually your third is the guy who's like sometimes the up-and-comer in the minors, too.
Not in Vegas.
That's
in Vegas it was, because it was Logan Thompson until, and then Robin Lehner goes down and Logan Thompson comes up and turns out he is the guy. And then Aiden Hill's the guy.
So
who was their 4th goalie on the depth chart at one point.
So you already mentioned a couple of guys from this team. You already mentioned Stolars and Ekman Larson, and we talked about Evan Rodriguez too with Florida. But there's a couple others I want to bring up because they definitely had a focus on defense, by the way.
Yes.
Because in addition to Ekman Larson, Nico Mikkola, Dmitry Kulikov, Mike Riley, and every one of them, Mikkola got a decent deal at 3 years, $2.5 million, but Kulikov is 1 year, $1 million. So is Mike Riley. Those are good.
Wow. Yeah. Are you paying?
You're not paying much.
Or Mike Riley anything at this point? Yeah, I'm not signing.
No, but it's good for
either
depth.
One of them to more than 1 year.
No, but it's good for depth, and that's a team that probably looked at the way the playoffs went. Gee, we really could use some depth.
It turns out you need to be deep to go 4 rounds. But
and I guess Ekman Larson kind of replaces Mark Stahl to an extent, and Mikkola kind of comes in and replaces Gudas.
Probably upgrades both of them, to be honest.
I would say, a little bit, yeah. Oh, and by the way,
Mikkola to Gudas is a little closer. Gudas might be better, at what he does at the current moment, but.
And by the way, do we want to mention another former Flyer who got signed in Florida just for the sake? And you'll know why I'm saying it for the sake of mentioning it, because it's for the sake of mentioning it, just like somebody else for the sake of mentioning it mentioned his name. Okay. Anybody want to talk about Jerry Mayhew getting a contract?
Good old Gerald. Good for him.
Let's see if there's any other ones quick while I go through the rest of the team. I found the Drake Caggiula one in Edmonton interesting.
Yeah, I'm not really
interesting.
surprised.
I mean, they're not big cap hits. You knew that. Like, it's Edmonton. They don't have a lot of cap space.
And how many guys sit around going, yeah, I would take pretty much any contract with Edmonton, or any guy with some skill and some speed. So who goes, man, I would take a contract with Edmonton just in case I get a chance to play with Connor.
Now, speaking of players formerly with Edmonton, because this will be a tie-in, because it's one of them at least. Let's talk about Detroit for a second with this, because we already talked about Gostisbehere and stuff like that. But
okay.
Their offseason is really interesting to me because they gave out some contracts that, we mentioned the Compher one too. And I really like JT Compher. I don't know if he's the same player on Detroit that he was in Colorado because it's a different roster. Klim Kostin got a 2-year deal with Detroit. Justin Hall for 3 years. James Reimer for a year. Daniel.
Did they sign Ben Sherratt this offseason?
No,
that was last year? Okay.
But Daniel Sprong for a year at $2 million. See, here's the thing. I like that contract in a nutshell. Like 1 year, $2 million for Daniel Sprong.
That's a great deal on him.
Could be really good for them. But I'm looking at it and I'm I don't know if that team's better based on all of those players, Like the sum of the players, I don't know if it makes them better.
Yeah, but I think those guys might end up being more depth than necessarily they appear at first look. Like if they're expecting Marco Kasper and Elmer Soderblom and some of these guys to kind of take that next step.
Yeah.
If Simon Edvinsson makes the team and is playing on the roster this year, then one of your defensemen get bumped out, right? Maybe that bumps Jake Wallman out of your lineup.
I was gonna say one of the guys I was gonna say isn't Berggren one of those guys too for them?
Yes.
Who's like, hey, if he jumps, then that's a big deal. Sure,
William Wallander. They have Jared McIsaac is there and could make a step at any point. Like they have the kind of, quite frankly, they have the kind of organizational depth I'm hoping that the Flyers get to coming out of their rebuild. Like, I want the Flyers to have this same exact offseason that Stevie Y is having 2 years from now.
I get you. Right? I understand it.
Where you have your big pieces and you have your guys who you're expecting to step up.
Sure.
And things are kind of starting to come along. Like, they're starting to come out of their rebuild and just starting to kind of work their way up the Atlantic Division.
So let's do a couple quick hitters and we're out of here.
Nothing
big with Dallas outside of the Duchesne one, like Craig Smith, Sam Steele, a couple quick 1-year deals. That wasn't much. This is a fun one because you realize the only contract that Columbus has signed in the last 2 weeks has been the Adam Fantilli entry-level deal.
Yep.
That's pretty interesting. We touched on a lot of the Colorado guys. Some of these guys are sticking around. We said Druin. I don't really see anybody else for Colorado that we didn't touch on already. Let's not go there. This is an interesting one. Chicago signed Ryan Donato for 2 years, $2 million.
I think Chicago signed a bunch of guys that if things work out with Connor Bedard and they actually have a bit of a team, then I think a lot of those guys stay. I think they dump a lot of the depth at the deadline.
Well, here's the interesting thing. You're thinking of contracts that were signed a little earlier, perhaps. Like, I think they re-upped Athanasiou, right? Like, that's one of them.
I believe so, yeah.
So they actually only have signed one contract since free agency opened. It's the Donato one. They still haven't signed Bedard to the entry-level deal yet.
We all know that's coming.
I know we know it's coming, but you know what I mean. I'm just bringing it up. I think Carolina...
As of right now, by the way, Fantilli and Carlson have signed, so...
Correct.
Out of the top three, it is just Bedard.
By the way, did Will Smith sign?
I don't believe so. I think he's in college, isn't he?
Yeah, that's right.
I don't believe he'll be signing.
That's
at least this year.
No, you know what it is? I think he might have been able to attend the development camp. Probably is what it was.
Yeah, you're allowed to attend dev camp, but you can't sign.
He
looked great in dev camp, though.
I'm sure. A lot of the Carolina stuff was re-signings. They brought back Freddie Anderson, Antti Ranta, Jesper Fast. Fast, by the way, at 2 years and $2.4 million is probably a really smart signing for them. Like, he was good in the playoffs last year. Good for them throughout the course of the year. I understand that. I guess the only notable name to bring up is Brendan Lemieux signed there for a 1 year, $800,000, which was like,
so that means Tony's going there too, right?
Well, that's why a lot of speculation.
Bring the podcast back together.
I got nothing much from the Calgary side of things. Buffalo signed Eric Johnson, which I found interesting.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, Eric Johnson, who had been in Colorado forever.
Yes. Staple of that line forever.
Okay, this is one team I do want to talk about really fast because we already mentioned a few of the names, but I want to talk about Boston's offseason because Boston went very heavy on the short-term deals. Yes. And got what I would call a lot of value plays, I think. Like,
I agree.
Like, I loved the Morgan Geekie signing for them. I thought that was a great decision.
Like, we all know Bergeron and Krejci are coming back, right? Like,
I would be shocked if Bergeron's not back, and I assume that Krejci's going to follow.
If y'all thought Boston was just going away that easy after that first round exit.
No, and hey, all right, fine. You want to play this card with the Bergeron one, by the way? What did I say when their series ended when we were doing all the playoff shows? Like, it just felt like it can't end like this, right?
That's exactly
right.
And I think that's what they're saying to themselves. You don't sign Milan Lucic if Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci aren't coming back. Like, it feels like Chicago Blackhawks getting the band back together. Right. Trading for Brendan Saad for the 100th time.
Now we did. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of these veteran guys too, like to bring in James Van Riemsdyk, to bring back Lucic, to bring in Kevin Shattenkirk on a 1 year deal. Like,
the boys are back.
They all qualify in the same way. Now they're they made some others that are different that I think will be good for depth. Jesper Boquist is a good pickup at for 1 year at $775,000 for depth. Do we want to mention this guy really quick? Also, Patrick Brown, former Flyer.
Yeah.
Now that one makes a ton of sense, by the way, because where did he play?
Kid.
Right.
Yeah.
Where did he play college hockey?
Say it.
Come on. Now I do want to mention. Normally, you would think why would we be talking about this team in a free agency thing? But this is actually pretty noteworthy because I don't know if you've seen this or not, so I do want to mention it. Arizona made a few like low risk and like
Arizona is dangerously approaching, looking like they might be an NHL team this year.
Because let's mention the names that I do want to count, because we mentioned Zucker already, and I want to throw in Troy Stetcher, Alex Kerfoot, Nick Bukestad, Travis Dermott, and Zach Sanford all kind of qualify as like
that's like a line and a half of real NHL players.
Right. Now I do want to mention another player. This is the reason why I'm bringing it up, because I do want to mention another player who had a very strange saga go on that was in the news league wide. That was Alex Galchenyuk. Alex Galchenyuk, who now let me try to make sure I remember the timeline of this correctly.
Signed on July 1st.
Well, hold on a minute. Alex Galchenyuk got traded to Nashville in the whose deal was it that I'm thinking of? You know what it was? It was there was the deal. It was the deal with Colorado. It preceded the one with Hayes, where it was a salary dump.
I know the one you're talking about, but I can't remember the details.
Ryan Johansson. Okay,
right.
That's what it was. So Alex Galchenyuk's rights went to Nashville. Nashville says, we're not signing you. So now he ends up in the free agency pool, and he signs on July 1st with Arizona.
Yep.
And then apparently, well, let's not say apparently. Let's start with what we know for fact, which is 11 days later or less than 2 weeks later, was being bought out for purposes of contract termination. By the way,
for purposes of termination.
Right. The contract was 1 year, $775,000.
Right, it was a minimum deal.
Right, so it's not like it was a big deal or anything like that. Apparently, he was arrested for what was a hit and run and all of this type of stuff, and allegedly said some pretty awful things. Right. Was threatening, made horrific comments, things like that. Resisted arrest, I believe, was part of the report as well. Like
allegedly death threats and racial slurs. Bad.
Right.
Bad.
Right. Resisting. So that saga's over with at that point. Like they've
his career might be done.
I think it is at this point.
At the very minimum, I hope he gets the help that he needs.
Sure, of course,
because that is not a person who is rational.
But otherwise, everything else qualifies. Everything else was done. That's it. No more. There's nothing else to really talk about with that. It is what it is. And oh, by the way, I guess really quick, we should mention from a free agency standpoint, there are a handful of names out there that don't have homes.
Right. There are still some names remaining to be shaken out. A lot of that some of that has to do with the Erik Karlsson situation.
Right. Now and this is really cool because lucky for me, and I just looked this up, Daily Faceoff, and Frank Saravalli usually does this with the top free agents. He just updated the top remaining because of DeAngelo hitting the market, I believe.
Okay.
So these are the handful that don't have contracts. And in some cases, I understand it, but in others, it's not a big deal. Like Jonathan Toews, we kind of think that we know where this one's going, so he's still available. He might be done. Phil Kessel is still a free agent, and I wonder where the thought process there is. He just won a Stanley Cup, even though he wasn't actively playing in the games. Yep. He just won a Stanley Cup and is 35 and has a lot of mileage. Maybe that happens. How about Paul Stastny at 37? You wonder.
Yep.
But there's other guys who are younger who you're like, why hasn't this happened? Dennis Malgin and Thomas Nosek are two that kind of come to mind.
I think Matt Dumba is kind of waiting on the Erik Karlsson saga.
Probably a little bit.
It appears as though he has a deal in place with Arizona, but he hasn't signed it kind of just in case.
Let's see.
Vladimir Tarasenko.
Well, Tarasenko's the big one. I was kind of going to round out with that.
Oh, okay.
Noah Gregor and Pia Suter are still available. Tomas Tatar is still available.
Jesse Puljujarvi, Ethan Bear, Max Comtois. Some quality names.
Now, Comtois, there's a caveat. I think I saw because he was on the Hockey Canada team. So there
enough.
You go.
He ain't
probably why.
Anywhere.
Right. That's probably why they're waiting. I've seen a lot of stuff. Patrick Kane's still a free agent, and I've seen a lot of stuff that Kane's going to wait until he's closer to being healthy because the injuries wore him down so much he's not even going to sign right away.
Patrick Kane strikes me as the point where he's at his career where he's going to sign in January.
He
with
could.
Somebody.
I mean, so you're kind of you're playing
who's earned it if not Patrick Kane? Like I'm not,
You're playing the Justin Williams card then.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And at this stage of his career, he can pick anywhere he wants. Just come in. He's got more money than God. He can sign for $1 million somewhere at the deadline. But
sure.
All right.
So that's everybody. So
I was going to say, I think it's time to wrap us up here. We've been going for a very long time. We don't cross the 2-hour threshold very often, but all right, that'll do it for today's show. You can find us on all your social medias, Facebook, Instagram, etc., etc., etc. I assume Twitter still exists where you live, but, who knows? Follow us at YWT Podcast. Follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. Kevin, you on Threads yet?
I am.
Okay. You want to throw that out there, too?
Sure, I'm on Threads. It's the same thing.
Kevin_Durso there, too?
It's the same thing.
All right. Kevin_Durso everywhere you go. We're on sportstalkphilly.com. You can find us there, too. We're everywhere you find your podcasts. And we'll be back in 2 weeks. We're in our summer schedule now, every 2 weeks until the regular season. I think it's only 4 or 5 shows, so
yeah,
couple weeks, and then we'll see you. And I'm going to see Fallout Boy tonight.